And are you getting from major fund now?
Large.
Split up the middle school dance.
What's up? Well, have you done this one? Have you done this one?
This will be 8 years leading this type of company for me. Yeah, and I've been in this space, like startup life.
I don't know about that. Did I?
Before that, we got paid in vain. You know, it's like healthcare focused. Well, oh yeah, right out of undergrad, 10 years with business going.
Oh, wow. Do they pay attention to
Part of the side.
That's good. Yeah, my son was at BCG for a couple of years, and he didn't, he'd come out of business school. He'd been at, state government consulting firm down in DC. AMS. He put it out. Yeah, I'm sorry. It was booze, right? So he worked there, and then he went to business school, and yeah, but now he's in a mid-stage startup. He went to healthcare school. Well, so he does all that, but he's doing well. Yeah. Yeah.
Get a drying rack, maybe.
This thing.
Water. I just refilled. No, I still have her. You want to go grab it? You can hold for a second.
My wife doesn't have much control over the crowd, so I couldn't go raise a family. That type of thing, so payments,
Is she in the, are you both on the consulting side?
we love it.
Yeah. I mean, that's not, she's on.
Better now. Yes, and just all, post-COVID, it's one of the more muscles.
Right.
Better.
Before it was Blue Sunday and come back Thursday night.
It's all the better cultural, that was more about that transition, right start. Still,
Travel sounds, well, you travel. I didn't have to travel that much for work. It sounds great until you actually do it for a while and
one year, I kind of understand the topics.
right.
Paper files and paper in rush.
I'm really not a good water drinker. Kind of like my major issue. That's one of the things I joke about exchange from school when I was in. It was I would never look at that. All right.
Roberta and I never had
We're ready to call to
Recording
order
in
the February
progress.
25th, 2026 meeting of the Newton School Committee.
Like I said, sounds great. You have to do it all the time.
Mayor Laredo, would you like to join us at the February 25th meeting of the Newton School Committee? All right.
Ready?
We'll begin with the pledge like we always do. We have a fifth grader leading us tonight, Maria Peralta from Burr School. Maria's teacher has this to say: Maria is kind, thoughtful, and a hardworking student. She is always willing to lend a helping hand, whether welcoming a new student or using her Spanish language skills to help others. Maria challenges herself and gives her best effort in everything she does. Her constant smile and positive attitude make a meaningful impact on everyone around her. Would you like to come forward? There's no obligation to participate, but for those who are willing and able, please rise. You want to go to the microphone whenever you're ready.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there anything you'd like to share about your school?
Sure. Well, what I think about my school is it's a great place and I feel very comfortable there. The teachers are very, very helpful, and the students there are also help me with if I have a question, especially the teachers.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great.
you.
Great job. Okay, we will move to public comment for the evening. I think we have one commenter online, so if we can maybe tee that up. This is a chance for members of the public to address the school committee. We won't be able to reply directly during the meeting, but we are listening and considering your feedback. You are also welcome to reach out to us directly. Our information is on the website. So I think we have Heather Tausig. You'll have 3 minutes. Heather, and Jason will give you a 2.5-minute warning. If you can start by stating your name and address when you're here.
Okay, thank you so much. Hello, my name is Heather Tausig. I live at 120 Garland Road, and I appreciate the opportunity to address you again tonight on the topic of gun violence prevention and gun safety. Both my daughters went through NPS, and I'm a volunteer with the Grassroots for Gun Violence Prevention and a co-founder of the Newton Gun Violence Prevention Collaborative. As I'm sure all of you know, gun violence is the leading cause of death for American children. Researchers have estimated that 30 million American children live in a home with firearms, and 4.6 million of these children live in a home with at least one loaded, unlocked gun. I know that here in Newton, many people think gun violence can't happen here, but this is a city with over 3,000 firearm licenses. And as you all know, Newton South experienced a lockdown just before Thanksgiving. I think this painfully illustrates that Newton is not immune from this threat and the impact of gun violence. I'm here again to ask the school committee to take a leadership role in moving forward a resolution that would direct NPS leadership to share safe firearm storage education materials and protect Newton students in the same way we receive other safety information, such as the signs of suicide curriculum and screenings and anti-bullying programs and reporting systems. Research is clear that safe gun storage education can save lives by reducing the risk of suicide and reducing access to guns by those who might cause harm to themselves or others. In fact, in January 2024, then Secretary of Education, Dr. Michael Cardona, sent a letter to school principals and district administrators with a customizable letter template encouraging all school building and district leaders to share key information about safe firearm storage because doing so has the power to save lives. However, we've not seen any education on safe firearm storage since Interim Superintendent Kathleen Smith's newsletter in May 2023, which is also now almost impossible to find even when intensively searching for it. I'll be submitting these comments with specifics and sources in writing, but I want to emphasize that nationally over 11 million K-12 students attend schools with firearm storage awareness policies in place, and resolutions have been passed in over 100 districts with 21 states. In Massachusetts, 17 school districts have passed secure storage resolutions, including Arlington, Cambridge, Duxbury, Framingham, Lexington, Medford, Newburyport, and Stoneham. Schools care about a range of safety issues like drugs, alcohol, vaping, internet safety, suicide awareness, etc. Our goal is to normalize the conversation around gun safety and secure firearm storage, along with all other safety issues impacting schools and students. An Ad Council survey in 2024 found that 82% of Americans agree that having more productive conversations can help reduce gun injury and death among children and teens. The Massachusetts Association of School Committees passed a statewide resolution in November 2024, strongly recommending that Mass school committees urge their school districts to provide secure storage messaging to parents. Please help avert a tragedy in Newton before it's too late by passing a secure storage resolution that directs NPS to share safe firearm storage messaging with our NPS families. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, we will move to the consent agenda, which contains meeting minutes from the February 2nd meeting, grants, gifts and donations, and several field trips. Is there anything anyone wants to pull from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make that
Victor
motion.
motions. Is there a second?
Second that motion.
Linda? All right, let's take a vote. Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7 is yes, Ward 8.
Yes.
Mayor Laredo?
Yes.
Okay, consent agenda passes 9-0. Moving to our discussion for this evening, we start with the superintendent's update.
So given the length of the agenda and how many meetings we have in a row, I'm going to forego certain remarks and save them for the next meeting. But we did start with a nurse's update, which is usually tucked under my superintendent's update. We had a lot of questions this time from lots of members about benchmarking year over year, about the usefulness report. How does the nurse use this report? So I figured I'd just invite her to come talk about that and how she uses the information. Please know that the nurse has not been a part of the school committee meetings before and her updates. So this is a new practice and we're getting used to what you kind of want to know. So I can't draw any conclusions from the monthly data yet, but this is only the 4th month that we're really looking at that data together. So if the committee is interested, I will have the nurse leader come in and we can talk about that at our next docket planning meeting. So if that's of interest to you, let me know. About 4 members had questions about benchmarking and how's this used and what does it mean to the nurse. And so I'd just as soon love you to meet her and hear from her directly. All right, sounds good. So next, I believe we have our CFO, Liam Hurley, here for the next, he's online.
Okay. That's right. Welcome, Liam.
I don't see Liam on the list of attendees.
Okay. He did tell me he was coming, so we can either move ahead and then move back, and I can try to grab him in the interim. Let's see. Want to move ahead and then we can go back?
Yeah, I think
Liam
we
arrived?
could. The next item is the state of the schools winter analysis.
Okay, that's me.
It's you.
Yeah.
Great.
So as the committee knows, we were going to have a brown bag lunch on Tuesday to have some discussion deeper into what is in this report. But just as a frame for everyone, we do have a graphic representation of, Liam's saying I am here, but Stephen does not see me. So I don't know what that means. And I certainly want to get him on sooner rather than later. If that's okay, Madam Chair.
Of course.
Okay.
I am checking with him, but I don't see him on the list yet. So he's texting me too.
Okay, so we'll keep going and Liam will come on when we can. So our director of MTSS, Maria Colby, is here as well. We were going to be the duo of dynamic duo of your luncheon time yesterday, but the snow did us in. So we're really proud to share this this presentation. And Stephen, we're going to go to our mid-year STAR data presentation. Thank you. I assume you're driving then?
I can drive.
Okay. I don't know if the laptop is arriving to us, though. That's what usually happens. Anyway, so I just wanted to let the committee know just how proud Maria and I are of this data, and that the committee before you certainly charged us with creating the kind of ecosystem that would allow us to know how are my kids doing in the Newton Public Schools in a variety of ways. And tonight, the state of the schools speaks specifically about academic performance in certain metrics. And I just want to be really clear that this is not the whole child and everything about every child. We will come to you at different times of the year talking about things like school connectedness data, how are students feeling about their schooling experience, mental health data, other types of achievement data. You'll hear about discrimination reports and bullying reports. Those things have been more regular practice in Newton Public Schools. So we pull out the mid-year benchmarking data for STAR and math and ELA, along with absentee data, because that is something that the committee has really been interested in hearing about. We also want parents to know about it because they all received letters about their students' performance. We have been holding sessions, 2 of them so far. Another was slated for last night, which we canceled. We just did not think anyone was coming. And we have another on Thursday evening at Oak Hill. I do want to say it has been sparsely attended by parents. So we are trying to figure out what is the just right venue, format, timing for this. Because in my listening sessions and entry plan, all parents wanted was, could you please tell me how my children are doing and how, like, prove it And then when we hold the sessions on that very topic, 10 people showed up. So we got to figure it out. And this is an open plea for advice about, would an online session be better? We did videotape our last session, and we are videotaping tomorrow's session with live translation. So we will blast all of that out. We blasted it out last night to everyone if you want to watch it from the comfort of your home. But what we really want to show you here is that we are watching how your children are doing and growing and developing. And we are also celebrating our Newton staff in this report. We're really excited about the improvements that we are able to note. And the strong performance that is the bedrock of what Newton teachers do. So it's exciting to be able to show you that in very quantifiable ways, and to also highlight, as a community, we really need to address student absenteeism issues together. It's no one part of the community's issue, but we do have a lot of students missing a lot of school, and we need to address that as a community. So there are 3 parts to our analysis: a math analysis, literacy, and a return on investment report, if you will, on how we have put intervention resources in at the elementary school, along with additional curriculum changes and intervention tools, such as phonology lessons. So with that, I think we can just dive in. And the committee have a lot of great questions, which we can also tried to work into the presentation, but members, obviously you can repeat those questions, and we submit them to the committee in writing so that everybody can get what they need when they need it. So Maria, did you want to start? Or
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I'm happy to get us started. So thank you all for the opportunity to be here today. And I just have to start by saying, just to echo what Dr. Nolan shared, that really writing these memos was it was just such a wonderful celebration of the bright spots that are happening within our district, and that we hold alongside the areas that we're continuing to work on. And I think that that was a really powerful process that I enjoyed going through, that we enjoyed seeing at our State of the Schools workshops with our educators. And that's really where this thematic analysis came from. It came from our teacher leadership teams that met at the elementary, middle, and high school level. And then those themes that they identified were the starting place for individuals like myself to jump into today. So given I know that there's a lot of information in these reports, and we did want to give a brief overview today of just what was the, what were those big takeaways that to share with you all, and also to share with our community at large. So the primary themes, if you think about the STAR winter assessment data, so this captures the performance of about 7,500 students in grades 1 through 9. And the reason it's grades 1 through 9 is our kindergarten students have not taken this assessment again yet, so we don't have growth data for them. We can give an update when we have that growth data. So those 7,500 students in grades 1 through 9 have taken this assessment twice, once in September and once in January. And that gives us a really powerful opportunity to look at proficiency, which we'll talk about here, and also growth. So some of the large takeaways when we look just at that 30,000-foot view at our achievement here in Newton Public Schools on these STAR literacy math assessments, that first primary theme is that we continue to see what we have seen before, that we are overall a high achieving district. We're looking at 74% of our students at or above benchmark in literacy and 73% in math. We are also seeing strong emerging bright spots of growth for that growth percentile. So STAR assessments, all universal screeners have some form of growth metric. For STAR, they call it student growth percentile. And that average range is 40 to 60% growth. Anything above 60% is considered high growth. And that's where we want to be for all students, quite frankly, but certainly for students that we're looking to close any sort of gaps with. They need to be above 60% if they're going to close gaps in their learning. So we'll go into those more through the slides, what some of those bright spots of growth are. And it's also important to note that student groups, we are absolutely still continuing to see students groups experiencing opportunity gaps that are leading to achievement gaps. And we'll go into this, the specifics of that you can see in the slides ahead. So a takeaway for myself with this is when we think about that the MTSS triangle has been around for a while, right? The triangle here that now is a DESE in Massachusetts has it as a school building instead of a triangle, but that triangle is where we started back in the early 2000s. And the core of that triangle is, you know, what in the research world they say the primary prevention, but that is the universally designed Tier 1 instruction. The idea that core meets the needs of most students, typically 80 to 90% is what we would really love to get at. So that 85%, we can make it 90 at some point. I'd love that. Let's start with 85, that 85% proficiency goal. We're on our way to that. We're looking at 74, 75%. A notable takeaway from this slide when looking at mathematics in particular is the number of students that are exceeding benchmark expectations. So 41% of our students, grades 1 through 9, when looking at standards mastery, 41% are exceeding. So that is just a challenge that does not exist in most surrounding districts for our educators when we think about the wide range of ability that's within any given classroom, and needing to provide systematic intervention and support for students that are below benchmark. And also when you think about 40% of a class potentially being exceeding expectations and ready for more extension. Our growth data is something that's been very exciting to look at, at grade level department meetings, at individual teacher meetings, more in an aggregate. This is a really powerful metric for us to say, how do we get every student in that high growth area? So what we're seeing here is a celebration of elementary literacy in particular. So having 2 grades where the average student growth percentile is in the high growth range is really exciting, because what that means is, think about the number of students that are actually above 62, for example, to be able to make the average 62. So that grades 1 and 2, that's a huge celebration for us of seeing that growth. And then when you look at the other elementary grades, we have grade 4 coming in right at 60, and then others just a few points under. And when we think about our math growth, we also see some of the grades that are approaching that high growth metric there as well. So giving us a lot of excitement around what can be possible related to how we are accelerating student achievement.
Maria, I'm just going to jump in also. I just want to give a shout out to the Newton Schools Foundation, which helped to fund, along with a congressional earmark, 2 years of our work with the Center for Educational Leadership in our Instructional Leadership Academy. So every single administrator, and this year, MTSS teams at every single building, so that I just want the public and for you to know, it's not just administrators and people in this room looking at that data, that we are actually asking our teachers to look at this and dig down into instructional reports, which you'll hear more about shortly. And what do we do with that? And how do we share those bright spots and those best practices across grade levels? So we know from John Hattie's research, who has done meta-study after meta-study of what moves the needle in schools, that collective teacher efficacy of this type, common data sets, common students, and common strategies, is the #1 predictor of student improvement. So we are not only doing the numbers, we're doing the people stuff too. And that's hard work. It's really hard to make some of the changes, and it does constitute a change of practice for many, but we're really seeing incredible growth and incredible work by the teachers.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so what this is going to show, these next 2 slides, is that we are continuing to see, when we look at the district level, the same achievement gaps that we have seen historically in our MCAS data. I do, though, want to just take a quick moment, and I know the agenda is long today, but just to contextualize this a tiny bit, the Bright Spots memo that you received at the end here gives 8 examples across 13 schools, and I could have listed many more. This was just the start, really, of what could be listed here, of examples that are completely contradictory in some ways to what you're going to see on these next 2 slides. So this is something that the bright spots of schools that have closed achievement gaps for particular student groups either when we're talking about race, or students with disabilities, or students within our METCO program, or or ELL students. We have schools within a year's time have closed that gap by half. We have schools that have, for particular populations, closed it completely. So I just want to say to any of our educators listening out there, we see those bright spots. We know the work that is being done to make these numbers not a reality for us. And we just aren't seeing it in the larger aggregate yet, in the larger district numbers. And we need to. And there's endless urgency for that felt by everyone in all of our schools. And the work is being done. And we are seeing so many examples of, and when I say bright spots mean student experiences are changing. Like that's student experience, that students are no longer experiencing the opportunity gaps that's leading to the achievement gaps we see. And what's on the next two slides is what our district data looks like for all students grades 1 through 9. This is the math example. When broken down by race, seeing that our district average is 73% proficiency, and you can see that for Latino students, that's 48%, and the average for Black students is 37%. That is certainly not something anyone accepts, and that is why we are doing the work to see those not be at that place. Additionally, this is a literacy example, when we look at our students, our overall baseline is 74% of students that are at benchmark in literacy. When we look at students that are within Newton Public Schools as part of our METCO program, their average proficiency rate is 49 or 45%. Our students in IEPs is 39%, and our English language learners are 19%. So this is information that, again, we are seeing different numbers in pockets and bright spots, and that's amazing. And I'm so thankful for the work that's happening in all of our schools to have that be happening. And we just aren't seeing that in the aggregate yet. I look forward to a year from now being able to show you all different numbers, and I expect to.
So Maria, there was some real questions on the next slide about how come there's more students being tested in math than literacy? So can you explain why it might appear that way in some areas, and what this two-part literacy thing is that we do for assessments?
So what happens for literacy is that most districts, and we are included in this, our students in grades K through 2 take the STAR Early Literacy Assessment. And that is an assessment specifically designed to capture foundational literacy skills that are not embedded in connected text. So basically, we're measuring skills that are still being learned in isolation related to reading.
What are some of those skills like for our littlest people? These are kindergartners. We can't assume they can read the minute they walk in the door. So what do we do with them?
So we are looking at a lot related to phonics. So like phonics is really the bread and butter of a lot of this assessment. So a lot around letter sound correspondence, a lot around pattern recognition. We're looking at, there's auditory components to this assessment. So a lot of it is they aren't expected to read words fluently at this point. So they're listening to sounds, they're blending sounds together to be able to pick the word that they hear. So there's this assessment is designed for our youngest learners, and districts give this in grades K to 2. Districts then, Newton included, give STAR reading in grade 3. What is
Don't get emotional.
No, I know. I'm telling you, this was incredible. So what we saw in the winter administration, given what students showed in terms of their readiness, is that 70% of our second graders, so we would expect outliers. So we would expect second graders to be taking STAR Early Literacy with a handful of students in other districts, for example, that would experience a handful of other students would transition to STAR reading. It's that transition from learning to read to reading to learn. We had 70% of our second graders do that within that period of time, which means 523 students took STAR reading in grade 2. And if you look, they were 76% proficient. So it wasn't like they took this and then we had this this group of students that did not show proficiency. They showed proficiency when taking an assessment generally designed for students that are not yet at their grade level. So that was, and it exists, of course, because there are a student or two generally in a class perhaps that might be ready, but this was 523 of our students did this. The other piece is, you'll hear about grade 2 later in a different slide with their high growth, but our grade 2 students, when we talk about how we close gaps, this work of targeted intervention, core tier 1 instruction, high quality teaming results in what you see at the bottom of this slide. So for our grade 2 students that are supported on IEPs, they had a student growth percentile of 66.5. Now, knowing from the memo, our average student growth percentiles for students on IEPs is in the lower average range. This was exceptional. So this shows that like when we are doing this work and we are seeing, it's that phrase, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats. So when we see this work, that there was a transfer over to students with IEPs in a way we didn't see in any other grade in our district. So just a big celebration.
So
we'll be
we'll studying what our grade 2 educators, what their best practices are, what are their routines, all of those pieces, interviews. So, you know, kudos to grade 2. And also this is the group that has had our new literacy curriculum for the longest period of time.
Mm-hmm. And we did infuse this year, grades 1 and 2, a new supplemental high quality instructional material into small group literacy time. So the UFly Foundations curriculum, University of Florida Literacy Institute curricula for our general educators to utilize in small group time. And so that was another strategic layer that I believe is, we're seeing some impact there.
I do just want to answer a couple questions that came out from the committee. So there were some questions from the group about, so, you know, we've heard some feedback on the UFly curriculum and the pace, sort of the pace. So new literacy curriculum, all the new assessments, and the UFly curriculum. So the UFly curriculum was piloted in various pockets and wasn't seen everywhere. We wanted to see its efficacy first, but we just do want to acknowledge that these are a lot of changes for our staff, and been in some dialogue in various listening sessions, read our teachers union survey, just taking in all of the information. You know, obviously we were looking for results like this, right? We're looking for what works and where can we scale it across the system. But we're also listening to our educators and trying to understand what is the just right pace we move from as we move from here.
And I think UFly is a great example of this was filling a true hole. So like this was we had not provided anything systematically to our grade 1 and 2 educators during small group literacy time. So they had to create structured literacy lessons one by one for every single group they pulled. And so this was an example of, this was a hole that was identified. And so this was something that we were able to say, okay, we have something for you for this. And we're starting to see that here. Absolutely. So a incredible strength of the STAR assessment platform is the tools it gives our teachers to look at standards mastery. So what that means is within 3 clicks, a general educator that has, you know, 4 sections, let's think middle school for a second, of the same class or of a similar class, that within 3 clicks, they log into the Renaissance platform and they see what is called a standards mastery report. And it has the student names on the left. It has all of our state standards broken down by high level domain, because there's usually 3 or 4 sections, and they can see a version of what is here in terms of what is the mastery of each student and what is that quick visual that says, okay, I know I've already taught fractions, oof, but I'm all red here. So I need to go back and loop back to fractions because that my students did not show their knowledge. So it's important. So this is when these numbers are different than some of the others, because this is what we call like a criterion referenced measure, in that it's how did the student do against the standards. There's no national comparison here. It's how did the student do against the standards based on how they answered on this assessment. So within literacy, this affirmed what we have seen at MCAS for years, that it's affirmed what our focus has been at middle school already, that within informational text, that's the large domain, range of reading and text complexity came out as the lowest standard for elementary, middle, and high. Elementary is certainly a relative weakness because it's still 70% mastery, but it is the lowest at the elementary level for the standards domain. So elementary mastery of range of reading and text complexity for informational text in particular is at 70%, goes to middle school. That average drops to 51 and then goes to 47 for high school.
And I just want to say, so as the text complexity continues to creep upwards, the proficiency mastery level goes down. And, we are hearing national trends around, the changing reading habits of our young people, but we are the people to solve that problem. And we must, for their long-term life skills and for their college and career prospects.
Mhm. And then within math, both the strengths and the areas of challenge were not a consistent domain, which makes sense given how linear math is compared to more how holistic the literacy standards primarily are. And the largest area of weakness for our elementary schools was fractions. And for high school, that's algebra, which is seeing structure. The standard is seeing structure and expressions. And so this, again, this is really important information for example, as I was sitting with our director of mathematics this morning, unpacking a lot of this information in terms of for middle school in particular, looking at grade 6 and when is fractions taught. And so when do we need to loop back? So this is critical information for district leaders, but the core of it is really for the classroom teacher to be able to log in and see the standards mastery for their class, to know what shifts do I need to make based on what I've taught already or what I haven't. So a really important data point, and a troubling one for us, and I think one that gives us a really big challenge, is to hold this slide against what you'll see with elementary in a moment. So this captures the student growth percentile, the average student growth percentile of students who are below benchmark in mathematics in middle school. So students that are below benchmark, meaning, they're not in that, they're not in the meeting or exceeding expectations. Their average student growth percentile, and this is not a small number of students, we're looking at about 800 students here. These students have an average student growth percentile of 39, which is considered low growth. So what does this mean? This means that from fall to winter, essentially 70% of students across the country with the same scores as them to start in the fall grew faster than them. The comparison here is when we shift to thinking about what we are providing at the elementary level related to intervention, where we're seeing growth scores that are in the 60s and the 70s. Because they are getting a true double dose. They're getting their core tier 1 instruction and they're getting systematic intervention. We do not provide that structurally at the middle schools right now. And we see that in the data. And that's 847, I think is the number, students that are not, that are considered, that are low growth when compared with other students that started at the same place as them in their grade across the country. There's a lot of urgency to that number, I know for myself. The other piece that was consistent across literacy and math is just continued variability of presentation across our schools. So that overall 74 average proficiency, this is proficiency, every bar is a school of our 21 sites. And a reminder, like our high schools, it's just capturing grade 9, right? But this just as a quick visual to show the variability and the differences in achievement across different schools. There's a 21-point spread and proficiency across schools. So for elementary is the widest. We have it's 59 up to 74. So that's a or 82. I apologize. So like that, this is a very wide spread, and you can just tell visually by looking the differences by school. And so this is something we continue to address and think about resource allocation and think about how we're supporting schools so that student experience does not vary simply based on zip code or based on the school that you go to. So this is what Dr. Nolan was referencing around some of the attendance data that we have. And so this was included in the memo from Dr. Hogue, certainly. But, you know, the takeaway here is just the quantitative connection to attendance and academic achievement. And this is something that we as educators have lived since the beginning of time. And when it's shown very clearly both in the previous MCAS data, which is shown on this side from last year, as well as Dr. Hogue did an analysis of the winter star data and the connection.
And I guess I just want to add, you know, this is the first year that we have met the state's criteria and expectation for the regulatory truancy officer and truancy prevention program for the district. But I do want to say that many schools, deans, vice principals, principals have been working on this problem within their schools and making progress. So there are some bright spots and some notable places to look within the report that you've been given. But I guess my call here is to families and to say, you and your children belong here. They belong in school. They belong attending every day. And, you know, I was sort of flabbergasted to read on our local Facebook pages all about plans to pull kids out of the last 2 weeks of school because of the snow days. And I just have to say that I think that's a mistake. And I need families to attend the full year of school. And, you know, in pivot to that, I hear a lot about like, oh, well, they'll just show movies. We won't. We will teach to the end. When we have fewer than 10 students in a classroom, that is hard. That is hard to do, but we're going to teach to those 10 kids. So I guess I would encourage a culture change at large on the mindset here. We are expected to deliver 180 days of school, and we will do that. And we hope you will join us. And I also want to say that during the holiday period this year, we've had about 60 families pull their children out for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks of school to travel. And I certainly understand that those are family prerogatives and things like that. My suggestion is that they enroll and matriculate in a school wherever they are for that length of time. You know, the homeschool plans that public schools can approve are pretty light. Like, there's very few reasons that we can reject them. We do collect the follow-up information, but most families give us a pretty hard time about following up on that. So I just want to challenge us as a community to understand that as your public school, we are the folks who have to deliver this academic program, and we can only do that in 180 days. So join us for every 180 day.
Great. And so this is just a nod to the State of the Schools memo that you saw documenting that process in January. So we meet twice a year, January and June, with our school leadership teams to do an extensive workshop where they're following a data protocol to look at multiple sources of data, including their street data that they're collecting at their school level with student voice, to be able to identify 3 things: celebrations, focus areas, and what are our next steps to address our focus areas. And so they fill out that information out. That information goes back to their MTSS teams, and they get in the work, and we are able to see where they're drawing their attention to in their student groups. And so this is just some of the examples of what our schools shared. It was really exciting this year. I will say in previous years, we provided reports for our schools, like we prepared reports and we said, here's your report, here's your analyzed data. For this year, we were like, here's the platform, go. And so it was a shift of, and our schools did an incredible job because they've built those data literacy muscles, and they know what they're looking for, and they know their students, and their conclusions were right on track with what we've seen.
I also just want to say, obviously, Dr. Colby here has been a huge part of leading folks through that learning process. She'll push into PLCs. She helps people with that. But also Dr. Farag in the back and Dr. Roundtree, elementary and secondary assistant superintendents. Their job is helping the principals meet the moment with their teams here. So, you know, Aisha has 15 folks to deal with. Jean has 8, but 2 high schools plus the CTE high school. Like this is a lot of work on their part. And to make sure that the meetings that follow with all of the leadership, whether that's curriculum council of department heads or each of their individual principal meetings, align from there. So this isn't just talk, it's talk plus action, which should, I hope you see, feed up into the report on the strategic plan that you see here.
And then I'm going to be brief here. I could talk for the next 2 hours about the Path to Reliable MTSS memo, just because I am so proud of the work that has happened, but I promise I'm going to be brief. The thing I am going to say first, though, before we start, is that just for the information of the committee, if you did not know, just to hold that this fall was also, it was the first moment of, it was a result of a very significant restructure that happened last spring within our elementary schools. And just to, I wish, I don't actually, there needs to be a better word than restructure, because it feels so cold, because what we're talking about is that we had over 56 staff across our 15 elementary schools that were riffed in that reorganization. We went from 6 support positions at the elementary level, most of which were part-time and most of which were not Unit A members, were our Unit C members, to what we have now, which is literacy or math specialists that are certified in their area of focus and are mostly full-time within our schools. And we had the base formula that we applied based on enrollment, and then the needs-based additions for our 6 schools that met that criteria. So as someone who was a part of that, I believe in that reorganization, and it was an incredible strain on many buildings with individuals that had been in part of the fabric of that community for a really long time. And so when I talk through these next few slides, I do so knowing that not only was this new for our schools, these processes, this what we're calling capital I intervention, and the results that we're seeing here, but these literacy and math specialists were also holding a lot of this change management process that was just very different from what was the reality before, of a swarm of individuals that would come to a grade level at a certain time. This is a different model, and I thank everyone for their skill and their grace and their heart with all of this, as we are 5 months into something that is very different and was very disruptive and challenging to navigate, knowing that the humans behind all of that incredible work that was done before as well. So our reality that I'm going to show you now is based on the work of our schools and of the specialist-led intervention at the elementary level.
So it should just be noted that math and literacy specialists are student-facing positions that also push into grade level PLCs so that the instruction and the intervention is aligned. And then we use tools to ensure that if Maria is the general educator and I'm the intervention specialist, I know what she's done, so I can build off of that and intervene, not do the same lesson over and over, not duplicate efforts, but be really efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. So the literacy math specialists are working with students when the students are there. And then Wednesday afternoons, when the students are not there, they're joining professional learning communities with grade level teachers. They come they attend meetings twice a month for their continued coherence of work and their professional learning. So, again, I'm going to be brief here, even though I can't help but be just so proud of the work and so thankful for all of the efforts here. So what we saw here at the elementary level was just tremendously high growth. So for students that were in intervention, and what that means is that they still received their instruction from their general educator, but it means that they received, and this is what we're guided by law to provide, systematic intervention that is progress monitored. That is federal law that we must abide by. That is what the language is. That is provided 4 times a week. It has based on a learning target. There's at least 3 points of family communication along the way. So like there's that family engagement and transparency. There's progress monitoring about every 2 weeks, and is provided by a literacy or math specialist that's certified and highly skilled in this area for students. Students qualify for this based on a threshold that was set, again, a national threshold that is set, that is used very commonly within the STAR assessments. And the impact here was really just tremendous. So we saw that the average student growth percentiles for students that were in specialist-led intervention for that week, for really from October to December. So we're talking those 3 months, that we were at 67% for the average student growth percentile, and for literacy that's 71. So again, thinking about that range for that to be the average, that's just exceptional. And the the impact here, what this visual is really showing is that how we want an ecosystem of intervention to work, which is that in this example, 62% of students moved out. Like they're good. They got the intervention. They're good to go. Tier 1 can own them again. And then some students are persisting. This is the math data for as an example, but literacy mirrors it. And then new students pulled up, right? So then based on the new assessment, okay, 42, this is across all of our elementary schools, are now up there. And now this is giving us the 109 students that were initially flagged in that threshold. So that is what we want. We want to say, so it's 62% were initially flagged for math intervention, we're not. And then 54% in literacy that were no longer flagged in January. So we want that movement out. Okay, you're good. We're going to tighten up and get a little more intense to know what's going on with those kiddos that are still there and why we're still seeing that number. What do we need to be doing differently? And then that gives us space to respond to new students that are elevated for us to get that double dose.
I guess I just want to say there's never a set it and forget it moment, right? I hope that it's heartening to folks that K-9, 3 times a year, we're reviewing this to say, okay, maybe you exited at one point, but there's another dip and we're not going to miss you. And that's the power of the model. So kids truly do get what they need when they need it.
Another just a data point, I know the report is much more expansive and happy to answer any questions, but this is an example of an ecosystem at work. So this is by saying, okay, we have this targeted intervention system that is guaranteed no matter what school you're in, that this is something that a student will access support if they need it. They will get that double dose. We have our core differentiated tier 1 instruction and the strength of that instruction there. And then we have the work being done on those Wednesday afternoons in terms of collective teacher advocacy. Those 3 pieces together, we're looking at, so from the September to January for what is required by the state for us for the early literacy screener law, we went from 521 students elevated in September to 285 in January. So that is something that shows not just intervention, but also just the ecosystem as a whole that is working to support students and elevate the right students for us, because we need to know the students that are most urgently in need of us. And that is the work of this. So to be able to give that just in time right support. And so just before moving on and just thinking about this slide in comparison to what we saw with the middle school math, and the literacy numbers are exactly the same. It's a couple percentage points lower actually. So when we look at this, and then we look at 39 average SGP for students below benchmark in math, that's the difference of what we can't provide right now in middle school versus what we can at the elementary level. So thinking about next steps, and again, happy to answer any questions further from, I know the lengthy memos here. From what I'm thinking about coming out of this data is really thinking about how we take our procedural requirements related to systematic intervention that's progress monitored from the elementary to middle school, how we continue to use those standards mastery reports and build our muscles as a district to look at those just to strengthen our tier 1 instruction. And then, as Dr. Nolan was mentioning, continue to look holistically at how we address attendance concerns within our district. So thank you for the time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Dr. Colby? Mr. Lee and then Mayor Laredo.
As usual, Dr. Colby, a fantastic job and much appreciated. That was primary my thing. What I'm not sure this can be answered today, to be honest.
That's all right.
One thing I'm trying to reconcile in my head is the importance of the Wednesday short. You said I think 2 times a month, roughly, is what I recall. You saying that what I'm trying to balance, I guess, is having enough time that's available through the Wednesday half short days to be able to facilitate this work to support this MTS initiative, which I think is fantastic that we're rolling out. So great job. With some in the community who are interested in, if it's possible, reducing the number of Wednesday short days that we have, or maybe put differently. I'm just curious your perspective on whether that's not realistic for a longer term that we're trying to go down, or if it's something that's achievable.
So I'll answer that, Member Lee, if that's okay. So it's going to be some choices this committee's going to have to think about. So without that time, then PLC time, professional learning community time, has to happen somewhere. So where would that be? Right now, it's governed in a contractual document in our union contract. So we're about to come into a union negotiation year. We should talk about it. Other districts do it in afternoon meetings, or they embed during the school day, those types of times. We are struggling mightily to just ensure the right amount of prep time and common planning time for all of our elementary educators now. So we're in a little bit of a bind. We take it away right now, it's tough. We take it away and put something else in, it's different. And we'd really want to do that with our union partners and make sure that it makes sense and that we can do it.
I appreciate it. Yeah, and I think that's one of the key messages that I'm hearing is that time is currently being used productively, and that's important for people to know.
It is. And we had an email this week, all of us, about, why do you have these meetings? And it makes me crazy as a parent. And I understand that as a working parent. We do use Zoom meetings to do that. We don't just travel around the city the whole half day. We actually do really maximize that time. And it should be outgrowth of other time within the school day that happens on other days of the week. So it's not just a one and done. It sets up other meetings.
Mayor Laredo?
Thank you. Really very interesting materials and great presentation. Could you just explain for at least just a couple minutes or so,
Sure.
how the specialists provide their services both especially at the elementary school level? Is it that a specialist goes into the classroom while the teacher's working? Is it a pull-out model? Is it some combination?
Yeah.
Just an idea of how it functions.
Absolutely. So what we have prioritized this year is a guarantee that if you are a student that is within that threshold, so you're significantly below benchmark, that you will receive that capital I intervention. So that is a pull-out model. Generally, it could be like pull out to right outside the table, outside the classroom. So it doesn't necessarily mean pull out very far away, but that is a 20-minute minimum, really 4 times a week. There's a few cases where it's 3 because it makes sense for the student, in particular if it's a student on an IEP for literacy, for example, but they need math intervention. So there's competing demand. So maybe it's 3, but I'll say 4 for the example of this. So that student would come with 1 or 2, potentially 3, but likely 1 or 2 other students to that 20-minute time that those students have an aligned learning target, that they have similar learning needs, and they are receiving that systematic instruction in that learning target for 20 minutes for that 4 times a week. Every 2 weeks of that, they would receive a quick dipstick measurement of how they're doing for progress monitoring. That gets entered. All of our specialists hold, 15 minutes, twice a week is what it should be. I know some of them stretch, or they're busy. They're seeing kids all day. So it's hard sometimes to make that time, but they do hold time to enter that data, then that progress monitoring data, into a platform that it was called EduClimber. It's where we document where the intervention that's happening, so that classroom teachers, for example, can log in and see that we have that progress we can share with families. So a student will come out, will work for 20 minutes, will go back into their classroom. That happens in grades 1 and 2, primarily during small group literacy time for literacy and for math win block. In grades 3 through 5, that happens during the EL Education All Block, which is a differentiated instruction block. It's part of the EL curriculum. But it's the differentiated instruction part, or during their win block as well. So they're not it's that supplement, not supplant issue, right? We don't want to take them from the tier 1 math lesson to give them, it's not a double dose anymore. You just gave them different instruction. So it's the specialists are seeing groups of students throughout the day that are across different grade levels, depending on the school and the level of need. They maybe divide up, and one specialist is K to 2 and one's 3 to 5, or, it just depends on the data guides, what the grades that they work with. But during the school day, they're pulling student groups. There may be some time in their schedule, for example, if there's if we see a classroom, for example, where the student proficiency is lower than some of the others, then maybe that specialist will push in for that tier 1 block to do some modeling, perhaps, or to show to do some co-teaching with that general educator, but the majority of their work is that student-facing side with direct intervention. They are within their schools during the school day. They're running those professional learning communities on Wednesday afternoon with grade level teachers. They are the facilitator. They're the glue for us there of a lot of the shifts we've been able to make with in some places regarding to like looking at an end of unit EL assessment, for example, and then really unpacking what that means in instructional shifts. They are the ones that are able to get the training and then go lead that information at the school level. And then they have time twice a month where they are receiving professional learning and alignment work across our 15 schools for them to then be able to go back in and receive training on some of the platforms they're using. And so like literacy, this is a new tool for them this year. So I think about our literacy specialists, they've taken on, they've lived through this restructure while also having a new literacy assessment and having to document intervention in a way they haven't had to before. It's been a lot, but that is what the role is. I can't speak to what it is at the middle school level because we don't have math specialists, and the literacy specialists are fragmented. They're part-time positions, and the way that a 6-day rotation works and the way the current schedule is, we have individuals that in 2 schools with that 0.5 that are able to provide some level of student support, but it can't be that capital I intervention we're talking about at elementary right now because of structural limitations and the number of times they can see students.
And I just want to add, this is not the math coach, literacy coach model of old. So that's been a disbanded model. So these are student-facing individuals.
Can I just ask one? First of all, that's really helpful to understand how the model works. You rely on the STAR met data as comparables. Which communities are part of the STAR system? In other words, who are we measuring ourselves against?
So it's a great question. We actually just asked them for like a general number because they don't publish the amount of districts that they necessarily see, but we've asked them that just so we could give that information to you all. There are at least 3 states that use STAR assessment for their like MCAS version. So, I mean, this is at the last measure last year, this was the most widely used universal screener across the country for literacy and math. I don't have that exact number.
34,000 schools.
Okay, there you go.
34,000 schools across the United States.
Right. I mean, that's obviously the reason I'm asking, and I understand you don't have the information, but it's obviously important for us to understand which communities we're using as benchmarks. I mean, are they all communities like Newton, suburban, high achieving communities? Are they communities across the socioeconomic spectrum? I mean, that matters when you're trying to figure out what your benchmark is and how you're doing. So we don't have it. We don't have it.
We do. There's 72 districts in Massachusetts using STAR assessments, and there is both a district benchmark and a state benchmark that we can compare our students to.
That would, and we can identify those districts.
Yes.
Right. That would be great. Not for this presentation, but obviously as we look at what we consider our peer communities, how we're matching up against those communities, it seems to me is critically important, good and bad, whatever it is. But
That makes sense.
data.
And
thank you very much.
Yeah, and our growth percentiles are measured against Massachusetts naturally. So like that's a national, that's a state measure. The growth percentiles are state.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alicia.
Jonathan?
I have a couple of comments. So I'll just sort of open.
Yeah.
First of all, maybe just to piggyback on what the mayor was asking about. My take from what you described here was that these are not relative scores. These are absolute scores against a competency framework. And so this is not a comparison.
So it's a great question. So it's both. So it depends which score you're looking at. The proficiency is norm referenced. That's across the entire country. So like so that is important. When we're looking at
as in we're comparing ourselves to all of the other schools in the country, or as in a set of competency standards that have an absolute achievement?
So STAR gives us a couple different ways to look at data, and it's really powerful and really good. It's both. So yeah. So I think like, so think about, so the standards, I think that's the most concrete. So like the one where we talked about fractions, text complexity, things like that. That one is like standards, did the students do it or not? So that's not compared to anything. That's just like standards and how did the students do?
And they're math standards.
Yeah.
Yep.
So like, so that's the most concrete.
Yep.
We look at growth, and the growth tells us it all comes from this scaled score. So every student gets a scaled score, and it's based on the complexity of questions they answered and how accurate they were. So that's at the top of the parent report, that scaled score, and all roads lead back to that scaled score. What happens for the growth is it says, okay, when they compare the two scaled scores, how did they do compared to other students that started at that same point and got there within our state? So that is for state. Okay. And then what the benchmark is doing, what that benchmark proficiency, it says, here's that scaled score, right? And here's what it maps to as a proficiency level, which is comparing versus it's comparative to this to state data, because it's based on linking studies with MCAS. So it is.
I was so close until we got to that last part. So what I want to hear, what I think I'm hearing, but maybe not. First of all, I meant to start this by thanking you for the substance of this conversation. I'm exceptionally excited to be able to have this conversation. So thank you. What I thought I was going to get was that this notion of 74.5% of students being either meeting or exceeding is an absolute concept against a standard that has nothing to do with how Brookline or Lincoln, or Concord or any of those other towns are doing. It sounds like maybe that's
no,
not
it's
quite-
basically, so I write this down for myself because it helps me always. So like basically when we say 74% of our students are at or above benchmark,
Yep.
they say basically 74% of our students are performing at levels predictive of meeting grade level expectations based on national norms and state proficiency projections.
Okay, so I'm going to take that as that's absolute. The growth question is a relative question against how other students do. That's the way I should think about that.
Yes.
Okay, super helpful.
Yes.
Thank
No,
you.
and I want to answer it technically correct and
Yeah,
also
no,
be clear around the clarity. So
Totally get it. Okay. Can you talk for just a minute, maybe much like the mayor was asking about, can you just talk, like, how does this STAR so I remember spelling tests from the Newton schools. I remember spelling tests and math tests written by Mr. Teft.
Yeah.
And it was 10 questions on a piece of paper that went through a copy machine.
Yeah.
It definitely didn't involve a computer and definitely didn't map back to anything else.
Mhm.
So, 200 years ago, to be clear, Mr. Teft was a venerated and exceptional teacher who
Teacher was
served
great.
statue, so it's all good. But like, how do I understand
Absolutely.
experience? What is this stuff and does it happen? What
Great
Okay, can I
question.
just step in for
Yeah, go
one
ahead,
sec?
yeah.
You may not remember this, but you took tests like the Stanford test. Do you remember the bubble sheets? Things like that? Yeah, you did. Because you and I are contemporaries and those were the tests then. So you did this, you just didn't know you were doing it. That's different from a content mastery test. Like, what did Mr. Taft? Is that what it's Teft? What did Mr. Teft teach and how did they learn it? That is a common assessment that we desire for all of our grade levels in various subjects, and we do not have built yet everywhere. So for example, in the EL curriculum in literacy, there's end of unit performance assessments, which have different ways to show your performance.
Yep.
Writing, reading, song, presentation, speeches, all the things that are guided by the state standards. And then we collect that data to say, what did we teach and how did they learn it? And that is what you got from your math teacher there.
Yes. So,
Helpful.
so then for STAR, so this universal screener happens 3 times a year. So it happens in September, January, and end of May.
Okay.
And for what that looks like for STAR, students click on Clever, which is how they get into anything for us, at all. It's just Clever. They go to Clever, it has everything
It's on a computer.
on their computer.
on a Chrome.
They log or on an iPad for our K-2 students. So they click on Clever. They're very familiar with this. They click on an R for Renaissance because STAR is a Renaissance product. And they click on R and then it has 3 buttons for them: STAR Math, STAR Early Literacy, STAR Reading, and now My Sabers, as we're using that product for them as well for SEL. They click on STAR. And what happens is they will be asked 34 questions. So if I'm a 2nd grade student, and this was my first time ever taking STAR, I am started, and it's the beginning of the year, or we'll start beginning of the year. Beginning of the year. I am given beginning of grade 2 standards to ask to answer questions about for literacy. So their team and their psychometricians have specifically designed questions to cover the entirety of the state standards for a grade level in the most efficient way possible. And that is the power of these types of assessments, is that within 34 questions, we can get a pretty actionable snapshot here. It's not the end all be all. You have to contextualize with other things, but it gives us a good starting place. So I'm a second grader. I'm getting beginning of second grade questions. Now it's adaptive. So if you think about the standard measurement of error in the beginning, it's wide because you just started at second grade. So I start answering questions, and it's literacy, and maybe I'm pretty strong in literacy. So I start notching up, and my standard error of measurement is getting lower as I'm answering questions, because STAR and the psychometrics behind it is becoming more and more confident in how I'm answering. And so if I get a question right, it's going to put me in one direction. If I get a question incorrect, it's going to move me somewhere else. So that first time you take the STAR assessment, it's going to end you in a place based on your answering of 34 questions. Now, for all of our students that logged in January, it starts them where they left off. So let's say I ended at a 2.5 grade level about in my questions in the fall, then I'm starting at 2.5 grade level when I log in, and it's going to ask me questions, move me up or down, and it's going to get information about my standards mastery. A big strength, and I think about students I worked with as a special educator for a long time, I would have given anything for these standards mastery reports as a general educator, as a special educator, because you can also adjust the starting place. So we do this very thoughtfully, or they can start where they are, and if they get a couple incorrect, it'll bump them down. But when I think about students that I was working with multiple grade levels below, but I still wanted those actionable insights for them around standards mastery, if I'm a student in 6th grade in our reflections program, I can take the STAR early literacy for assessment, for example, or STAR reading, and I might get grade 1 skills or grade 2 skills because that's what I'm learning, but like that's still really actionable information that my special educator deserves just as much as a general educator does. So that is the beauty of this type of it's an adaptive assessment that in 34 questions and through their spine of research shows that they can get pretty close. Now, a teacher needs to look at that and contextualize, and I meet with a lot of teachers looking at those instructional planning reports for students or for their class, and they'll say, oh, yeah, those 3 are right on, but I wouldn't teach that one. Like, yeah, okay, that's why we need teachers to look at reports and say, oh, yeah, that's not a priority. I haven't taught that yet in the curriculum. I wouldn't go to that one, but I'm going to focus on these skills for these students. So it gives those starting places for our educators, and from a student experience, it takes 20 to 30 minutes total.
That was going to be my next.
Right,
This is
so
a half-hour activity for a student 3 times a year is the way to think about that.
And I add just one thing, just a couple other walks down memory lane for you instead of the Stanford might be the Terra Nova, the California Achievement Test, the MAP growth test. These are things that were way long ago precursors to this. Can you also speak to the question we were asked about? So what if my child is in a program where maybe they can't access the STAR reading? What are we doing for that?
Yeah, this is an incredibly important question around access, because if we're going to have a universal screener, it needs to be universal screener for every single student in our system, regardless of how they access instruction. So I can give an example of how a student in one of our specialized programs at elementary that uses eye gaze to indicate their communication. So like usually a field of 3 or 4 took STAR early literacy exactly as designed. So they took STAR early literacy because they can choose from a field of 3. And so how did they modify it? They gave it across 5 days, which is totally fine. You can pause the test and restart it. There's no issue there for stamina of the student. And they had just a simple visual where the student could choose from that field. And they got some actionable information for that student. So I start with that example to say that because of STAR early literacy in particular, and because there are math readiness questions also in STAR early literacy, that the number of students that will need an alternative assessment to this, and as someone who worked with this population, started my career with this population of students that were coming out of the Franciscan Medical Hospital preschool, like I don't think we have many students that can access this. This is the pro of the design of this. And we're in communication with special education leadership of what this would look like for students. The challenge is that for us to choose something for other students, we need to choose something that can have growth percentiles over time that we can reliably. We have a strong psychometrician here that works for us that can do something in Dr. Hogue, but she shouldn't. We can't invent something here. So it needs to be, if we're going to choose a parallel assessment, it needs to be something that can measure growth over time for those students. So there's complexities, like one we really like is used often in 3-year reevaluations for those students. And so it's like, is that okay? Is that not okay? There's just some questions here around. So I think we can have confidence generally in how we can modify and adapt for students to be able to get that actionable insights. It goes down to pre-K standards. Like I think we can be confident, and we do need a parallel assessment also. I'm confident we'll have one starting in September. We're just, well, and there aren't great options, quite frankly. So if anyone would like to make a lot of money to design something, that would be great. But we're reviewing what's available, and we will have a solution for those students starting in September. And I apologize we haven't had it this year, but this has been our process.
Can I ask one more? As we think about the two things stood out to me in reading the longer memo, one of which was this disconnect between external support on I'm going to get the language wrong, but basically computation versus concepts within math. And then the other was this thing that we were talking about here tonight around what read to me like lack of attention span in reading. How do I think about, Dr. Nolan, you opened tonight a little bit with this, what we need from the community and what we need from parents by way of attendance and engagement. How do I think about what we need from the community and from parents in order for us to be successful in both this math question and then also this literature, like reading longer texts question?
Well, I guess I'm going to speak to you as someone who.
Maybe I'm asking the wrong question.
Well, I'm going to just say, I grew up in a home, I'm one of 9, and, my parents weren't going to tutor me up for the things that my school couldn't do. So like the way I approach public schooling, like we need to be that comprehensive support, and we need to be that solution for you. That said, we've been holding these How's My Child Doing sessions because we are eager to talk to parents about, the first night I was like, so is this what you expected when you came to this thing? Like, is this what you wanted to know? Because our family engagement office wants to do the parent academy work around, okay, we're seeing this wide swath of blank in our community. We're going to educate parents and give them the knowledge. What can you be doing at home? How does it affect what happens in school? And we want you to know what we're doing so that there can be that partnership, that we're at our best for kids when parents and school are working together and know what's happening to the students. This will all feed into what are the other types of assessments we create? What does homework look like? What are the routines that we train parents on? So we really were hoping for more attendance at these sessions so that we could have that two-way dialogue. What would be helpful to you? What do you need in order to support us in this? So we're in the baby stages of that, but that's our plan.
My instinct is that the greatest traction there is going to come through back to school and curriculum nights, and that you're going to, I realize there's going to be a desire to engage more frequently, but my instinct is that you need the school level, for most people and most families, the point of connectivity is with the school and the principal and the teacher. And so to get attention and traction, you need to market through we need to market through that channel. That's how I think we got to get there. And I also just think that's when the mindset is there for a lot of parents around engaging in those kinds of issues. So that was my list. Thank you.
Good. Right. I've got Tamika, Linda, Jason, and Tyler. Tamika, and then Ari.
Thanks, Alicia. And thank you, Maria. It's been true to form over the years that your passion, knowledge, and drive around MTSS and interventionist work it's been a bright spot. And I think you've got a convert in many of those of us on the committee. I do want to follow up on one thing you said, which was around, looking at the that's not the right word, the anonymized graph of schools across the district, the 21 schools. You can just, at a glance, you see there are disparities in proficiency across some of the schools. We don't know what levels they're in. We don't know where they are, but we know they're there. And when you talked about this particular graph, you mentioned that it helps to you and the team who's looking at this to deploy resources. Can you talk to us a little bit about what those deployed resources might look like, how they would be differentiated at those particular schools where we're seeing there's an acuteness to the need to have greater student growth and greater proficiency? What are we doing acutely for those schools?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can speak to that at elementary because we have a strategic response at elementary for that right now. So for the 6 schools that have the widest variation, and this was predictive in some ways because we had to determine this prior to allocations in the, in April, and we got it right. These were the schools the same schools that we expected. There's 2 ways that we've looked at, really 3 ways, but 2 primary ways that we've looked at deployment of resources there. First was in the literacy and math specialist allocation. So that reorganization was cost neutral in the sense of, what we were able to do, but we did a base formula based on enrollment. And then for those 6 schools, we were able to provide more with the understanding that there were just more students that needed intervention in those buildings. And so to think like that 2 schools that were next to each other, that had different student profiles would be seeing the same number of students was incorrect. So that's one layer, knowing that that's just the in the moment kind of reactive layer. It doesn't solve the what we're looking at, but we want to make sure we're meeting student need in the moment. So that's like that first initial Band-Aid, I guess, is one way to think of this, like meet the moment, meet those students. There's more students that are below benchmark that need support in those places. So that's the first. But the second is really more support of my department, our small but mighty department, with that at the school level in terms of the MTSS teams that are there. So we have a small support of the MTSS coaches. There's 2 of them that go across every single elementary school every week. And we divide their time based on need. So they are supports for our principals. They co-facilitate the MTSS meetings. They meet with the specialists. They can provide support related to what's happening at PLCs. They are, so for our highest need schools, they're there for a whole day or for half a day, providing more guidance and more support related to how we're looking at that ecosystem for students. Because when you look at that graph is not going to change if we just look at intervention. We have to look at what our tier 1 instruction is doing to meet the needs of all those students, when we can layer intervention on, and what do those Wednesday afternoons look like for our educators. So that is what the resource allocation is that we have at our deployment right now. Now, if we have a better day of budgets, then there's many other ideas I have, and I'd be happy to bring those to you, but that's what we have. And then my time is the other piece.
Just to add to that, the reason there's only 3 is that the year prior to my arrival here, all of the assistant principals were cut at the elementary levels. So ostensibly the kind of instructional work that we're talking about would be done by a principal, right? Instructional leadership. But that principal can't do that when they're dealing with the 15 million discipline situations that happen in a day. And none of our elementary staff can do lunch duty. This sounds like so plebeian, but since they can't, someone must. So there has to be an administrator doing that. So we went from 15 or however many APs there were at the elementary level to these 3 women, Maria and 2 people, who helped to tee up the MTSS and intervention work on the tier 1 side and help facilitate that. So that was a reorg that happened before we got here.
Right.
Well, I got here.
Yeah. And I think, yes. And I think for, speaking to middle school, I know our middle school leaders and educators often talk about themselves as the middle child, and there does seem to be some truth in that when we think about how resources have been shifted from them. So we don't have, when we think we have general educators, we have special educators, ELL educators, all that have their mandates related to their time. We have mental health staff that all have their duties that are related to their work. We have the 1 to 2 APs and the principal. There's no other deployment we have to be strategic with right now at the middle school level, outside of our time and our professional learning. And believe me, we're working our best we can with that, and the amount of time that we can provide support. But that is, we've seen really really promising movement, in particular at those high needs schools, of shifts over time. And I look forward, I mean, that's something I'm hoping I'd like to be able to come back and share with you all at the end of the year, because we would have 2 years of really systematic, strategic deployments of resources at those at those schools.
Which includes reduction in the number of special ed evaluations and reduction of students being eligible for special ed in those 5 high need schools, and the Ainger School, as we talked about last year, as our proof of concept school.
So you use the term Band-Aid, and I was thinking of it more in terms of triage, which is
Triage, that's
very,
so
very
similar. Yes, triage. That's a better word.
And so I think the concern that many folks will have when thinking about the this chart and understanding that there are disparities across the district, is that you folks have thought about it and are already doing the work to triage and making sure that the limited resources that we do have are being apportioned in a way so that, as you said, next year when you come back, those numbers are going to be better.
They have to be better, right?
They have to be.
They do. And when we look at like who is pulled in an intervention threshold, for example, and some schools, their entire school might pull 11 students, and in another school, that's just 1 grade. And so that's just different. You can't have the same allocations in those schools. And so we have to be, if we want our educators to be data driven, so do we. We need to be that as well.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Linda?
Thank you. This was fantastic. Really appreciate all the incredible work that you and the whole team is doing.
Yeah, thank you.
I've got one, I think, easy question and then just one statement. My question is on the growth, why are we, I'm curious as to why it's relative to the state.
Yeah.
And my question is kind of driven, I think we've all read about the state of Massachusetts and how much catching up our entire state has, particularly after COVID. So wouldn't we want to see how we're doing from that growth number relative to other areas of the country?
So it's a great question. So we can look at this a variety of ways. So I could answer that question, and also to say that we have choices in the future of what metrics we choose to pull and what we choose to do. So for example, we've also gotten questions like, why can't we have just a district benchmark where we compare within ourselves and as a district? We can look at those pieces. We're still in that baseline time for ourselves for that piece. So the student growth percentile, we can look at it against national norms. The only reason we are so the practice in Massachusetts of the places that Dr. Nolan mentioned has been to look at the state through the state comparison, because really for ease of family understanding, because what it does is it, through their linking studies, matches against the MCAS categories. And so for families, it's that like common terminology around the benchmarks that allows them to like have kind of one language that they're learning related to this. And so that's why that's like the baseline practice. And I hear you, like I look at the national myself just for my information to look at. We can do that. So that like Renaissance gives us that capacity. It's more just how we, there's a lot of questions strategically about just the information that how we make this accessible to our families.
Well, I also just want to say, if we're trying to measure, which I heard the committee prior to you say, we start things, we don't know if they work or they don't work, right? So if everybody in the state of Massachusetts is using the same benchmarks, skill benchmarks and the same content standards, at least there's some commonality there that we can benchmark against. So then when we put a new reading program in or something like that, and we have 13 years of 20 years of MCAS data, I felt like that would give you more confidence about when we were trying something new, we could make some statements about change that were meaningful.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. My quick statement was, Superintendent Nolan, I really appreciate you bringing up the change in mindset around attendance. This has been kind of a hot button for me personally. The 21% of grade 12 students that are chronically absent is outrageous to me. And I feel like my intuition tells me that is not due to sickness. And, you know, I've had my own kids say to me, Mom, why do we have to go to school the day before whatever vacation everyone else isn't going? And there's so many things in life that we can't control relative to the success of kids in school, but we can control their attendance and vacation plans and so forth. So I do think that is something I urge the entire community who are listening on Zoom, but I feel like it's not going to be a one and done, like hundreds of families haven't heard that message. So I feel like we're just going to have to continue to ring that bell. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you, Jason.
Just want to echo what others have said. This is fantastic and really informative, both this presentation and the more detailed report. You know, if there were two numbers that, you know, we were just talking about SGP and methodology, but two that really jumped out to me of the whole presentation was on page 14, when an intervention for math, 67% SGP, when we see that that's a really hard number to achieve in general.
Yeah.
And literacy is 71%. I mean, am I taking that the right way, that shows that intervention is really working?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, so that's showing us that, like, so for the average growth for students was in the high range, or I mean, 71, the range is 60. It's above 60, right? Like, it's considered high growth. So that is gap closing. Like, that means it's like, that is, it's benchmark changing. It's showing that not only are students making growth within their targeted skill they're working on in intervention, but they're applying that to this STAR math assessment that is much more generalized. And we saw the impact to have that level of growth. So that's tremendous. And quite frankly, you know, in the first year of implementing anything, you expect pretty moderate growth, just because everything is new. So this is something that is exceptional.
So a lot of the next thing that I think is really positive about this is, you know, what's already been discussed in response to a number of my colleagues' questions around how this, whether it's against schools or particular segments, et cetera, helps to focus resource and tailor, through intervention otherwise, find where the gaps are in triage.
Yeah.
There are a couple I wanted to call out. There, both in terms of student segments like ELL on IEPs, as well as demographic segments. I think it's so important that we're highlighting those. We're showing them on the proficiency side. So I actually am really curious about how that maps to SGP, because I got to imagine those are a lot of the people that are in those interventions that are responding. And I guess to Tamika's point, like, we'll see that in the next year, but I'm also kind of curious now, like, are we seeing in the demographics, Latino and Black, are we seeing higher SGPs or not? And
so we're not yet. So we're some of them I embedded within, like, when we did the bright spots, I put like what the average was for the district of some of them, but I didn't for all of them. The growth gaps are just as persistent as the proficiency ones, and we're happy to provide that. But that was.
I'm glad you brought up the bright spots, because that's where I remember seeing it, and next time, my gentle suggestion is don't put the bright spots on page 56 or 56.
Start.
They were fantastic. I mean, it was really awesome to read through,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and those caught my eye at Newton
Yeah,
North
yeah,
to
yeah.
have segments growing at
Yeah.
60%, and
Yeah.
Underwood, Williams, and Countryside.
Yeah.
So I do think I encourage us as it relates to gaps to use that metric. I think it's really valuable, and I'm hopeful we do see those progress. The other area that I just wanted to bring attention to it that has really caught my eye was on page 10 in the middle schools. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So the two numbers I highlighted before where intervention's really working, those are elementary only, correct?
Correct.
And so then when we look at, I guess these are students below benchmark, not necessarily those for whom we tag intervention, but I guess that's probably intervention rich students.
Yes, you would, only that group would qualify.
So I guess I'm very curious to know what you think would happen to this 39 SGP group if provided access to intervention.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think thinking about,
Let's find out.
yeah, I say, agreed. And again, like when we think about those numbers, that's, 863 students. This is not a small number. And I think what I would say is that there are many things in education where we say, we think this, we're going to try this, like that's action research. That's part of our world, right? I will say, I don't think like this is not action research. We have piles of research and meta studies that tell us that this works when you provide intervention, truly systematic intervention in a double dose. At the middle school level, that research is just as rich. So we are ready. Like we have made the schedules. Our leaders have made the schedules that have literacy and math lab. So a 1.0 literacy or math specialist at the middle school level can do 28 blocks of support with the way the schedule works right now. So they are able to do 28 blocks, which gives us 3 essentially groups per grade to be able to provide the same systematic instruction that students are receiving at elementary. And so that's ready to go. We have the resources ready to go. I'm ready with the training. Like so can I say that we're going to be at 74 and 69 averages in January next year? I'm not sure. I'm an optimistic person, and I think we can get pretty close to that. For the students that engage in that level. I will say what we have as a companion at elementary is that infusion of high quality instructional materials that we did this year at the early elementary level. We have the teaming work at elementary has been really exciting this year with those Wednesday afternoons. So we have had components that I think it's the intervention at elementary, and they've been bolstered by these 2 structural components that are going to take some more time for us to build at middle school. So, and I say, I think we can get close. But we cannot take something like 28 blocks that a 1.0 at literacy and math, for example, 1.0 literacy, 1.0 math, that'd be 28 times 2. That cannot be layered on general educator teaching caseloads that are already full. Like at elementary, we were able to do a reorganization. We were able to make it work. There's nothing to be to be pulled from there or to reorganize at middle school to do something outside of new FTEs. So we're ready whenever we can do it.
I think it's very exciting.
Did you see she looked at me like, when are you going to get that done?
I think it's very exciting. This is meant, I was described by a city colleague this week in an introduction as someone who likes data. I do like data a lot. And yet I think we also know that it can be overdone. So I liked Jonathan's question around how much is this, and is this the right dose of testing, and do we get it and get out? And I know there's a lot of thought in that. I also really appreciate your thought about ensuring access with deficits, et cetera. And I know that as things roll out, that's an evolving process, but I agree that's very important. I guess 2 kind of questions off of that. Number one, how do you advise teachers when the test doesn't match their judgment? I know this child, that score doesn't, like in my household, we had an issue for a year, not naming which child, but it was like, Billy finished before me. So,
Yes, exactly.
So I guess we know with anything, like there's variability and it should be part of the picture. So how do you coach for that or help with PD
Great
address that?
question.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so I think what the base of that is what we talked about, that you heard when you went to the How's Your Child Doing at School night, that like this is one of our ecosystem of assessments. It's not the only one. So we think about, there's really 5, right? Like core assessments we do here. We have those like daily feedback that our educators receive from their students based on the lived experience of their teaching every day. And that is the most actionable for their instruction. What do they see every day? Then we have what Dr. Nolan was describing, any sort of common assessments, like I taught this unit, how did they do? Like that drives instruction. That's the engine that drives instruction. When I think about STAR, this 3 times a year, 30-minute assessment, it really is that like checkup at the doctor, right? Like the checkup to say like, okay, how is the student doing in relation to the state standards, but a little broader than what they do for the progress report, which is another important process that educators go through. So to answer your question, part of this is that our educators have very high fluency of how they use these different pieces. And they know that this is not the end all be all assessment. There are students that click through it. And so we do get lots of requests to reset the assessment, which we can do. So that's something where if a teacher says like, oh yeah, they just clicked through, I want them to redo it. Okay, that's fine. If that's something that makes sense for that student, then that is something we can absolutely do. It's not a mandate that has to be done, but that's something that is a learning opportunity for that student too, to show them a score and be like, wait a minute, what is this? Let's do that again. So that can absolutely happen. And I find sometimes with the standards mastery report, for example, when we look at that, teachers will say like, oh yeah, this aligns, but this kid, it just didn't capture them. And so like, I don't want to like, that does happen. Some of our multi-serve students, some students who are more complex, they were having a rough day and they don't want to take it again. And, that does happen. And that's why this is not the only thing we look at, but it is something that we can have confidence in, knowing that, yes, it can be, if that student just clicks through, I get that. And our educators are skilled at using it as one of the many data points that they use to drive their instruction.
And then, if I may, a very brief follow-up on that. As it relates to assigning students into intervention, I'm certain that the tests play a key role. But again, in those situations where teacher judgment says, actually, no, they're good, or the other way around.
Yeah.
They guessed lucky must have on a couple of these things, and this student should belong. Is that?
Absolutely. It's a great point. So we implemented this year systematic data meetings at the elementary level that our literacy and math specialists lead at every single elementary school that follow this flow chart that we created with special education and ELL voice as well, to be able to say it's a guarantee of instruction. So the guarantee of a student being elevated in this threshold is that they will be spoken about in terms of what is your instructional response. So this flow chart has different options. It could be that a student is on an IEP and already receiving specialized instruction in that area. Okay, that's their instructional response. It could be that the student is an ELL student that is receiving intensive ELD instruction and maybe needs a phonics boost, but not intervention. Okay, that's their instructional response. And we document this all on a spreadsheet that then goes into EduClimber. Or again, the other main side of that flow chart is the student requires intervention, so they receive intervention. And then to your point, there are other students. This is why we do the data meeting within our platform, so that they can pull up and say, oh yeah, to your point, there's 3 students that were cuspy on the assessment, but wow, they really need support. And those students can be added. This is our educators know our students, and this is not about being overly rigid. It is though about like everyone, like I've talked with teams sometimes and it's like, oh, the students in like meeting or exceeding expectations. And it's like, yeah, but they really need, it's like, they don't need 4 times a week targeted intervention. They maybe need a boost. They need a little something else because you know them, and that's fine. We provide all sorts of other differentiated instruction that is not that super intensive intervention over here. And so that's new this year.
But I do want to contrast that with these intervention positions at times in some places previously, like everybody got some, whether you needed it or not. And we just don't have the scope of positions and people and time for that. And so we trust the teachers, but just everybody getting something because that's what we've always done is not the right move. So.
And it's taking them from something. So anytime, and yes, we have our WIN blocks, but outside the WIN block, even the small group literacy centers, they would be doing something else if they were not pulled out of the room, or the small or all block, they'd be doing the all block curriculum if they were not pulled out. So it's that cost benefit of what they're missing. And so making sure if they're missing something, it's for an intensive need.
Can I just add, Madam Chair, I sent you all the list of the Renaissance Learning Districts in Massachusetts, but I want the public just to hear. I just picked the people who we typically pick as comparators within our list. So Brookline, Concord, Carlisle, Dartmouth, Harvard, Hopkinton, Lexington, Medfield, Natick, Needham, Shrewsbury, Waltham, Watertown, Wellesley, Weston, and Westboro. So those are just a smattering, but there's 92 total on the list you have in your inbox right now.
Are you all set?
Thank you.
Okay. Tyler?
I wanted to talk about it a little bit from the student perspective, because a lot of what you were saying I found echoed in the conversations that I listen in on when I'm in school and somebody brings up something and I'm like, oh, this is something we talk about on school committee all the time. And so I want to just take a second to inject a couple little thoughts that I've picked up on. One is when the committee is thinking about where to go from here, and especially how it relates to adding new curriculum to try to help all the students, I have noticed something where, for example, in math this year, my class has piloted, I think, at least 3 different curriculums so far, and it can be disruptive because a lot of times I find, like, I love my math teacher, and I find that the way that the learning really helps everybody, and then I see the class kind of deflate a little bit when it feels like it's less of our teachers being able to teach in a lot of ways. And there is this reoccurring feeling that sometimes things can get rolled out very quickly. And so I want to be careful as we are going to focus on meeting the individual needs as opposed to everything as a whole. If we're talking about this as pockets of need, I think it needs solutions that are addressing pockets, not that's addressing everybody, equality versus equity and all that. So that's one thing. A small note on the informative and nonfiction text. I would actually pin that less to attention and more towards what leveling it happens at more, at least speaking from the high school side of things. I would say that I take AP Language and Composition. Most of the reading we do in that class is informational nonfiction, while students who aren't taking it at that level, I think is a far less thing. So I think there's ties with leveling there. But then the last thing I wanted to talk about was the conversation around attendance. I think we have to be careful shifting it to families. I like what you said about this is a systemic responsibility, not an individual deficit. And so chalking it up to it being families going on vacation, missing too many school days, maybe isn't necessarily the fairest way of thinking about it. I know that's seeing that problem at North. A lot of the response is stricter discipline or harsher attendance policies, and maybe moving away from some of the larger issues. I would guess that the populations that are having the most chronic absences are especially people of color and people in special education. A lot of the need for that had been met in previous years with the Springboard program, which was discontinued. But I know that a lot of the work there was really aiding attendance, something I had the privilege of being a part of. And so thinking about ways to foster it as a community and systemically, not just putting the blame on students and families. Yes.
Tyler, I just want to reassure you that we have 7 other programs designed for students with chronic attendance programs, including mental health programs. And we opened 2 full Bright mental health step-in, step-out programs at each school in lieu of a school here at Springboard. So I just want you to know there was a replacement program for the Springboard. Now, no program is identical, and they are adapted to meet the cohort of students that come to us. So I hope that's heartening to you.
Yes, I also have seen I actually have been going through the process recently of trying to see if any of these programs would be a good fit for my needs as I continue thinking about it. There is definitely a gap left in the community that I think, especially as we were talking about Unit C and trying to find more individualized aid positions at all levels of education, is something that I think we need to keep in mind, and how that is very present throughout.
Ari?
I'm actually going to save some time because Tamika actually asked my question, but I do just want to say thank you for you and your team. I always get excited when you're coming to present to us or we're getting a memo from you. So really thank you for all the work you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Ari gets the prize for shortest airtime. Ben?
I'll go for the silver. I wanted to echo my colleagues' appreciation of the work, Dr. Colby. This is very helpful. It's great. Thank you. I also wanted to echo Dr. Nolan's comments on attendance. It is important and we should focus on it. And I wanted to echo Jonathan's call for Mr. Teff statue. Work on that committee together.
We can talk about what that should look like.
We must have been in that class together, so. Okay. I have one question that was looking at the good news, I think, on the absent student question on Newton North, page 41 of the memo. I guess I had two questions. One question is this a mirage? Are we going to find that when the weather turns and it's Memorial Day, all of these numbers fall off the table? And the second question is, if we think it's not, if we believe something good is going on, what is going on? What are we doing well? How can we take that and move it to other places?
So I'll answer that question. So we hope it's not a mirage, but let me tell you a story from Bigelow, which I wrote in this memo as well from last year. So Bigelow had killer improvement results last year, all year long, until we got to Memorial Day. And the later we got into Memorial Day, and then especially into June, and I think you all recall, we had a pretty late end of year last year. Parents had pulled their children for summer jobs, travel, and camp in the last 2 weeks and told us they were going to do that. And I was seeing that on Facebook over our snow days that was the plan. And people are like, I'm just going to pull them anyway. So I do anticipate if that's the cultural mindset for some of our folks, then I'm worried about that. You know, we don't know how big the scope of travel has been in previous years because we didn't hold parents accountable to the homeschool plans in the same way we did this year. So I can't tell if we did better or worse, or if the formal documentation of those trips and their homeschool plans helped us, hurt us. I don't know what it tells us yet because this is the first time we really put the pedal to the metal there.
Has something, well, we did the truancy officer. That's the stuff that we did. We did it at North and we did it everywhere else. There's nothing that you're putting your finger on that was uniquely done at North that might have led to them.
Well, North put into place through their dean structure and their principals and their vice principals and their guidance counselors a strategy because the data looked a lot worse. So I just want to say North is both still a place of relative low attendance at times, but also a bright spot. So it's how two things can be true at once. A lot of the truancy work took all of last year for us to hire that person to fund the position. And now she's working on what is our program. So what do we do? So we started this year with notifications, same day notifications by 9 o'clock to every parent whose child isn't in school. This was seen as a problem for some parents. I just need you to know, it sounds like a no-brainer. Like I want to know if my kid did not arrive at school, but parents were offended by it. You know, if their child had been late to homeroom and didn't get marked, like there was I put my kid at school, you lost them. So there was some tough moments, but simply the child dilly-dallied at their locker and never arrived at homeroom. So we didn't know they were there. And so these are normal school things, but for Newton, that was a big sea change to do. That sort of died down now and people are understanding how that works. But there is an expectation in our county that after a certain number of absences, 5, there's some sort of intervention from the system. Another at 8, another at 10, another at 15. And then at 22, we're supposed to file with the state something called a child receiving assistance with the courts. That's a tough thing to do. So we prefer to have programs with our social worker, our truancy officer, and our family engagement office to engage those folks. To Tyler's point, there are difficulties within mental health, struggles for students and school arrival. Those students may be in the chronic absenteeism numbers, but they're not who we're speaking to right now. My remarks this evening are to the numerous families who've let us know that they will vacation when they want a vacation.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you. This was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Have a good
Thank you,
night.
Maria, thank you.
Take all my stuff.
We'll do fiscal and ops with Liam. There he is. All right.
Hi, Liam.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm sorry for being not being in person right here, and very difficult to go after Maria. Nice job, Maria. And I'm not sure I can jump into it, or if you want to kick anything off, but I'm happy to go as well.
I'm going to let you take it away, Liam, so you can dive right in.
Sure.
For the public, every quarter we do a fiscals and ops reports, which allows you to understand how the school budget is being spent relative to our goals and line items published in our budget book in the spring. Tag, you're it.
Thank you. So you've got a report from us. This is the second quarter report, so reporting through December 31st. You also got a report from Newton Community Education, Kate Carpenter-Benier. That's a separate revolving account, and they again continuing.
And Kate is here, Liam.
Oh, hi, Kate. Nice job. So if there's any questions, Kate's there. So we've got a report from her. So this report for many of the new committee members may come as a little bit of a surprise. We're reporting a small deficit right now. We have had this in the past, and I want to go through some of these pieces. So we're reporting approximately 48% of our expenditure at this point in the year. It's about 1% higher than we were last year. And we're showing a deficit of approximately $620,000. I did get some information, reading through some information from my listserv, MASBO. I do believe that there will be an additional 300,000 plus or minus coming, which is not part of this fiscal and ops, through the circuit breaker account, through the transportation reimbursement. So that will be good news for us at the year end. This was something that we got last year on approximately June 28th or 29th. Governor Healy has posted something on that, part of the millionaire's tax. I don't believe it's a done deal yet, and I can report to you folks, continue to report on that one, but that would be some nice news that would continue to help with our transportation. Transportation, you'll see, is a line item that's we've also received some additional MECO funds, which also is helping us. So just to hit a couple highlights, I think there's probably a number of questions here. A few of our main line items here. Salaries, we've got several teachers. And again, none of this is, I would say, is really beyond that normal for us. We've got several salaries, 2 middle school staff members, as well as a couple of elementary teachers over budget. And kind of the bigger picture has been really the number of move-ins and kind of our category 2 BT aides, approximately 15 aides over budget, resulting in a deficit totaling approximately 630,000. Benefits as well, a little more than $70,000. Few more plans than what had been anticipated, and a number of plans that are a number of folks taking family plans. We do have attractive health insurance plans here in Newton. Moving to some of the expense line items, utilities, and this is going to be a theme we're going to be looking at in FY27. We're seeing higher supply and delivery rates in the utility lines. And I think you folks obviously can imagine we've had definitely a colder winter. This has been a cold winter than normal than it's been for a while. So those utility rates are up. We do work closely with the city sustainability manager, Sam Nyman. He's been fantastic. And there were some questions posed. We've worked for years on sustainability initiatives. You've now seen the recent car parking canopies out in the Ed Center. We've got those at other buildings. We've got solar canopies on many of our roofs. Ed Center just had a recent LED conversion. Many buildings have had those LED conversions. And we've done many, many things. We've got something called demand management response systems during the summer. We've also got a number of basically programs, kind of our dedicated DDC, dedicated controls that we basically look to try and control our utilities. But again, the demand is there for utilities. You can read this significantly with what's going on in the country with utilities and electricity. And I think if you look at your own bills, you'll see the same thing. Maintenance has been maintenance is a combination of many things. The main contributor there is what's called our charter maintenance, which is really our public buildings, which is David Stickney and team. This has been an area we continue to try to increase that budget over time. It's been habitually over budget, despite our best efforts. There's a lot of reactive maintenance things that happen to us, approximately $220,000 over in that line item. Contracted services, I've talked to you folks, that again is a bundle of different things. And when you look at the exhibits, we've got kind of a broad bucket, Appendix A, and then behind that kind of are some more detailed line items. Again, we have more than 7,000 line items, so many of these are just still roll up of these different accounts, and they're based on the DESI account codes. Contracted services, showing a deficit there. This has been something we've been working hard to and trying to figure out, has been our precision substitute staffing. This is running approximately almost $900,000 over our budget. This is something we had wanted to budget a higher amount last year. We've got, again, more absences, and we're using precision in ways, including our teachers. We're also using them for long-term subs and as well, actually, for paraprofessional positions as well. So the staffing with precision has actually grown. Again, there's certainly a lot of demand for that from our principals. You will see a line item, our substitute teachers. There's actually a small savings there. I think it shows the contracted services is I think preferred by our principals. I think they've gotten good services, and Precision is able to fill these positions. Just moving through a few more of these ones. Tuition is another big one. Tuition as a line item as a whole is our largest expense item. A gross amount is approximately $17.7 million. Again, we use circuit breaker to offset, so that kind of disguises the true cost of that. Our budget was lower, so we're saying 17.7. We did get higher circuit breaker reimbursement than expected, but we're still showing about a $500,000 overage in tuition line items. We are showing approximately 11 students more than we were this time last year. There was a lot of fluidity, though, in the circuit breaker, with our tuition. So we have students coming into the district. We have actually students that will age out. We have students that move out. We certainly have students that move in. We're also seeing, I think, several placements that are residential placements, which are very expensive for us as well. Transportation, I mentioned, is actually one of the better news story for us. I mentioned that we've got what's called a MECO, a special education grant, came in several $100,000. That was actually in your acceptance package. That helps offset special education transportation. We do have special education transportation for our students in Boston, and that will directly offset that cost, and that lowers our operating budget specifically. And then, as I mentioned, I'm like Maria, I'm an optimist and believe that we would get this additional $300,000 from the state for our circuit breaker, bringing up that circuit breaker transportation reimbursement to 75%. It's currently being reimbursed at 61%. So that immediately would help us by about $300,000 in terms of bringing this deficit down. I think there's a few other line items there. So what are we doing? We've put a purchasing and hiring freeze. This is something I've had to do. We've had to do last couple of years. It unfortunately feels a few more times than I would like to do. Dr. Nolan is really skilled at this as well, and we've really tried to basically slow things down. I mean, we're still going to need to purchase things. We are still going to need to make some hires, but the goal is to basically, if we cannot fill positions, we're going to really look at that and not fill those positions. We have several custodial positions that we're certainly going to take a hard look at. There'll be other positions in the buildings. If we can not fill them, we would not do that at this point. It might be a slower fill rate if possible. And we're also looking at all the purchasing and purchasing that we do in the district. So again, we try and define if this is needed. We're certainly going to purchase it. So we're not going to really deny schools if this is something that's truly needed. If they can hold off on it, we're going to do that. So I think that's kind of the broad level. I can go now certainly more details, but I just wanted to go through the broad level. I'm confident we're going to close this gap. The piece that has been a challenge in Newton is that not only closing the gap is one thing, so that's getting, landing in a positive position, but we actually need to claw and get our way to hopefully a goal of approximately $2.5 million as part of the FY27 budget. So you'll hear me say that our budgets are linked. That's how they're linked, and that's through that carry forward process we do with Circuit Breaker. So that will be more challenging. It's certainly our goal to do that, and we'll certainly be reporting to you. So with that, open it up to questions.
If I could just make an addendum on the carry forward, I just want to say that is a road the district got into during COVID times, which is not typical. Liam, nor I, nor the CFO for the city, nor the mayor thinks that's a great idea, but that is the situation that we are in. So I just want you to say we're in a different situation than in prior years where the hope was, or the expectation was, you will do this and that's your job. Now there's a different feeling like, wow, that's not a great place for us to be. Let's strategize on how we can not make that part of our budgeting this year. If that was the case, as is the case in other districts, we wouldn't be coming to you with any sort of deficit right now. We would be, because the school committee has bottom line financial authority on its accounts, you would simply hear from us where the movement was in the account, and the bottom line would still have funding in it to the tune of $2.5 or $3.5 million. So I just want to put that out there, that we're in a different landscape, but we're recovering from where we have been.
And I would be remiss, I'm sorry, Anna, I wanted to just thank the mayor and the team there. This also is assuming, and I hopefully will be acceptable to the school committee, approximately $500,000 transfer from the city for the full day kindergarten aides. When we were originally doing it, we were not sure, and the mayor confirmed that that was his intent, which is fantastic. Thank you, Mayor Laredo. So that certainly brings that original thinking gap down. As you're aware of that, the ruling we had on the K kindergarten aides. So thank you. Open that up.
I'm going to just clarify before I go to you, Victor. So you're showing around 600,000 deficit here. That is not inclusive of 300 you're expecting for Circuit Breaker.
Yes.
It's inclusive of the 500 for kindergarten aides. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Go ahead, Victor.
And Liam, it is not inclusive of the METCO funding, or it is?
It is inclusive of the METCO funding. We were aware of that. Was the METCO funding and the full day K, assuming that's acceptable, but it is not. I only learned about the potential 300, again, I'm estimating $300,000 for Circuit Breaker reimbursement for transportation only yesterday. So that was after the memo. So that's the only one that's not included. So that would bring this deficit down to approximately $320,000.
First thing, these are more statements, but first statement, I guess, is a big thank you to you, Liam, as well as to Superintendent Nolan, because I think the actions you're taking right now to prevent us from getting into deeper holes is important. So I even though nobody likes a freeze, I think those are important steps. So kudos to you for making the tough and important judgments. The one that continues to catch my attention is, well, many catch my attention, but one in particular is this 856K overage that's coming from teacher absences. And there's a gazillion things I know you have to do. So this is more like a nice to have than a need to have question. I'd be curious over time if there is a way to see what the trends and the reasons why teachers are absent. And I know we just changed from frontline to different systems, so this is not going to be easy. So don't take this as a must-have. But what I guess it's more of a statement. I'm concerned over time if there's a rise in this trend. How do we get to it? Because again, it has implications for precision staffing and all these other things. What we may want to consider as an option, I've seen in other districts, is whether there is some sort of incentive, I guess. Like, is there a way that we could give them, hypothetically, an extra personal day, not compounded, not rolled over every single time, if they collectively meet a, whatever, 85, 90% threshold of expected days present. We experimented with Arlington. I should put that system in. There's pros and cons to that, but I'm wondering, as a longer term question, whether we can kind of find a win-win here to reduce that trend.
Certainly, as negotiations come up, if that is what the committee would like to raise with the NTA, we will.
Well, anyone else? And
thanks, Liam. I hope you make it home this week. So On the substitute number, I heard you say the same thing that I read in the answers to our questions before, which is that we kind of knew some of this was going to happen because we pulled the number down in the last budget season below where it was probably reasonable to expect. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. I would ask that as a matter of practice, we try to get out of practices like that this budget season, as a number of us are working pretty hard to get through it. We know it's tight, but we don't want to just kid ourselves about what's realistic. And if we have numbers in there that we know we're not going to hit because we pulled them too tight, then let's get around the table and work it out until we get to something that we actually believe in. It sounds like you can solve the problem this year, but if the problem was bigger or if other things have broken other ways, it could be a real problem. So I think we should just make sure that as a group, we agree that's not going to be a practice that we get into.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I would just add, our practices before this were something that we discussed, and this may become the new normal for our substitutes, but we were actually pulling a number of our aide positions to cover vacancies, and so that was certainly a practice that that time, student services assistant superintendent brought to us and said, this is not acceptable. We can't be doing this. So this has been kind of an evolving piece. And so obviously absences are part of what any school district deals with, but this has been kind of an evolving piece as we've transitioned. And I don't think that we had ever fully experienced kind of what that rollout would be. So this has been changing over the last number of years. COVID then put a pause for these. We had a kind of a call out system. So the whole system kind of changed over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I should say for broader awareness, I know that we are looking at precision and operational changes that we can make in terms of how we do staffing and how we think about long-term staffing and outsource costs that we pay. So yes, keep pressing down that path and let's adjust our practices so that our forecast is actually something we can buy into. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. If no other questions, I think I would like to move one agenda item up and put forward a motion to approve the additional $500K from Mayor Laredo and the city to cover the kindergarten aides for the remainder of FY26, bringing the city allocation budget for FY26, inclusive of the Education Stabilization Fund distribution, to 293, 463, 623.
I'll second that.
Second, Tamika. All right. Any discussion on that?
Just in advance, I'm going to abstain on this vote, obviously, because it's directed at me. I don't think it's a good idea to voting on something that's directed at my attention. But for the record, as Liam has said, we committed early on, beginning of our term, that we would support this item. We fully intend to do so.
Call the question now.
Thank you. Thank you. Jason, do you have?
I just want to echo what Liam said before, which is thanks to the mayor for that position and forethought and following through.
I do as well, Mayor.
Yeah, as do the kindergarten classrooms across the district. All right, let's take a vote then. Ward 1.
Yes.
Ward 2.
Yes.
Ward 3.
Yes.
Ward 4.
Yes.
Ward 5.
Yes.
Ward 6.
Yes.
7 is a yes. Ward 8.
Yes, but thanks to the mayor.
Yes. And Mayor Laredo, thank you very much.
Abstain.
All right, abstain. So we have 8 in favor, 0 against, and 1 abstain. All right. So our next item, if we're going in order, is the strategic plan district goals mid-year update.
I'm not going to be long with this. There were a lot of questions. I answered them to folks, but I wanted to say first, the purpose of the mid-year update is to coincide with the state of the schools, to give you sort of an update on year 1 of the district's 5-year strategic Thrive 2030 plan, the deliverables and the plan and activities. There is at the back of this document an overview of the dashboard of metrics, which beyond artifacts completion show us that we are building an infrastructure to measure the impact of the changes. You saw some of the major ones tonight. 3, this document has bearing on your evaluation of me. I sent you a podcast 3 weeks ago on the superintendent evaluation process. And this strategic plan is 1/3 of that. So my student learning goal on AI, professional practice goal, which I targeted around the Math Pathways program and development of that. And then the third is all of the district improvement plan goals. I thought it was an adequate and helpful backdrop to our budget priorities discussion so that you could see what was happening and plan for in the strategic plan and see where we are placing it. What you can expect from me on March 9th is to see how the strategic plan year by year lays up against our financial goals. We've been in discussions with the mayor already about how do we do this in a sensitive way. I want to thank the chair and vice chair and Member Schlesinger because together with Liam, we have been having a lot of discussions about how to actually put legs and financial plans on the things that we've talked about for the last 2 years, but that everyone here cares about. There isn't a person sitting in this room that isn't on the Thrive train, if you will. And we owe it to the community just to give you that plan and the updates. So fifth, I just want to say the chart at the back of evidence metrics do not represent whether the thing is done or not, but whether we can actually measure it and show it to you by the end of the year. So you saw tonight all of the metrics on reading K-9, math K-9, they're ready to go. You're going to see them 3 times a year. There are some things that aren't ready to go K-12. For example, we made up this thing that we want to develop called the College, Civic, and Career Readiness Metric. That is still in development. It has one part of our Portrait of a Learner, one part to do with our new social studies curriculum articulation, and then one part, what is this like life readiness thing we're going to do? We're sort of on pause mode because the governor has come up with these new graduation requirements, which have similar goals and mandates that we don't know all the details around yet. So we're a little in a holding pattern. So the chart here is meant to just show you when we are in a holding pattern, when we are absolutely on target, and when we are lagging. So for example, and one of the members asked about this tonight, that the there was a metric on sort of a staff survey for culture and promoter score for working here, which our union partners by rights under their contract, since it addresses working conditions, the NTA would like to keep that under their power. So we have the NTA survey, but we don't have a survey that we have created ourselves. So that is an indicator that will not be able to be achieved by me. So we can talk about how we want to do that. But so that this is just an update. And then the final page is a mock-up of a possible public facing dashboard, a roll-up of all the metrics that you see here in an easy to use public look so that a parent can, anytime they want to go, check this out. We actually had a meeting this morning, our chief of data, Katie Hogue, and I, around Open Architects, which is our second data dashboard that we have for secondary data. We actually found out this morning we can create a live dashboard that updates and that families can actually mess around with themselves. So I love the way this looks, but I think we can make it look this way and be interactive. So we're working on that. So that's the update of the purpose of this report. It's so you can digest the progress that we're making. I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you have.
Questions? Stun them into silence. Right.
We did miss the NCE update. I just want to say
we did. Was that, I actually was a question for Kate. Is that something that you want to update specifically on, or were you here for questions?
I would be present in case there were questions. It was mostly embedded as part of the report, and so
okay.
There's no question.
Okay. Questions? No.
Real quick on that note.
Yeah.
So no questions, but I do want to just support and approve, or not approve, but laud NCE for all of the work you've done over the past year. It's really been remarkable. You and the community who bubbled up and said, no. Yeah, the proof is in the pudding. So congrats.
May I just?
Yep.
Yep, go ahead, Mayor Laredo, then Linda.
So I just want to briefly add that Ms. Bernier has been working with John Rice, who's our Chief Community Services Officer, who's been doing a terrific job working with her, our Parks and Recreation people, our older adult services folks, making sure that we're working together, that we're not duplicating programs. That's really important, but instead are trying to be supportive so that we all thrive. And I'm really appreciative of the work that Ms. Bernier has done in that regard. I think it's been extraordinarily helpful. And John Rice in particular has been leading the effort to break down silos which have existed previously. I think that's healthy not only for each of the individual programs, but for the city as a whole and the school system. So kudos, and it's good to see progress being made within Newton Community Ed, which I will state, if I haven't said before, will state again, I think is an exceptionally important resource for the community, provides wonderful programming for our residents, our students, and we want to be very supportive of it. So thank you.
Linda?
Yes, thank you very much. I certainly learned a lot through your report. The question that I have for you is at the very end, you alluded to the need to kind of reinstate I think you called it a finance and operations role, but it wasn't like an ask. So I just wanted to understand where that stood.
Well, we're bound by our commitment to being self-sustaining. And so at this time, we don't have the money. And so, but I do want members of the school committee to know that we're stretched very thin. So we are doing kind of as much and even more than we were doing a year and a half ago with substantially fewer resources. And so that is a sustainability question that we should all be aware of. And we'd like to do more, you know, around, Maria just did this amazing report. Like, we want to be part of that effort too. And we certainly can be if, you know, you need to leverage out of school time as well as in school time to move students' performance. So, yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Good. Jason?
I just also wanted to share knowing how much assessment and change and improvements were underway over the last 12 months or so. To see a projection of ending the year with a profit is really exciting. So congratulations.
Thank you, Jason.
Yep. Tamika?
So as I think about it, I do have one question for you while you're here. Could you talk to us about how NCE kind of appropriates new programming? And the specific potential new program that I'm thinking about was one that this was discussed in front of the school committee a couple of meetings ago, was this music education program that it's a struggle for NPS to deliver, but it seems right size for NCE to deliver. So how do you within your you know, NCE, how do you assess whether program is a go, a no go, or you can handle?
Traditionally, it's through basically parent and school community demand. And, you know, we do surveys and we've done focus groups, and then, you know, folks tell us what they're looking for, and then we can source that kind of programming. It's also pretty organic. People submit course proposals on what they'd like to deliver to their neighbors. And then I think and then it can be opportunistic. So if there's an opportunity like the music program, or John Rice was just talking about another program, we would consider it and see if it's suitable, kind of consistent with our mission, and then also if it's sustainable financially. And so right now, like, we would like to do something like that. And right now we're stretched so thin operationally that the numbers would have to work. And I don't know if I have assessed this in the past. I don't know if the parents could actually pay for the increase that would be required in order for us to pay the additional staff administratively to coordinate the program. So that's part of the
appreciate the inside look.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Just so you know, we pay for the instrumental music people on staff, and it's their sort of extra sliver of time that they give to the after-school program, right? So they're here and it's sort of seamless. These folks would need to be hired straight up. So I think there would be an investment we would have to put into it for it to run.
Yeah. But you're right. That would be a wonderful, like, that's a wonderfully enriching part of our community, and it'd be great if we could be helping to sustain that. So, yeah. The other thing I want to do is I really want to thank people right here for all the support in the last year. It's been huge. Steve, my commission chair is there. He's been so supportive along with the other members of the commission. Jean Roundtree has been incredibly supportive. Anna and her team. It's been a really positive year, and I think that the team feels really good about it. And Mayor Laredo, like, we've been just so happy to see you and your team come in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you very much.
All right, final item is an update on the Underwood and Ward Statement of Interests. So we have a memo, and I'll let Mayor Laredo speak to it in our materials, where the mayor indicates that Josh Morse is the chief operating officer of the city, is undergoing an analysis of the Ward and Underwood building projects. And he is well on his way, hoping to have a recommendation by June, and that has sort of changed our views on what we might do with those SOIs. So,
Yeah, let me be really clear why we put this out. We are going to make the initial decision by the end of June based on Josh Morse's work and analysis as to whether consolidation of the two schools is even feasible from a variety of different standards. If it's not feasible, end of discussion, okay? We're not going to spend more time kicking the can down the road. If it is feasible, then we'd continue to explore that with significant public engagement to decide if in fact that's the path the school committee wants to go down or not. But we don't need, I'll be really blunt, we've been kicking this can down the road for years now. Ward and Underwood are each about 100 years old. I don't care what you do in a school building, 100-year-old school building that for the most part has not been touched, just does not meet modern standards. So I want to assure the public and assure my colleagues in the school committee that this request that we not submit a statement of interest to the MSBA in no way is an indication that we're going to slow the process down at all. In fact, it is my firm belief that we're going to have at least a decision one way or the other, at least initially by the end of June. If the decision is we're going forward with two separate schools, we are going to go forward with plans for one of them, likely Ward. That would be the obvious choice, but we'll have a consultation there. If for some reason the decision is consolidation is feasible, then we're going to move forward quickly with the school committee to really more fully explore that to see if that's the route we want to go. But I want to emphasize to the Ward community, the Underwood community, the school community at large, and the residents of this entire city, we are not going to slow this down. I want to be crystal clear about that. I would ask, however, that the school committee vote not to submit an application to MSBA at this time, based on the reasons we stated here. And again, we're going to continue otherwise full speed ahead.
Thank you. Questions? Tamika?
So it's not exactly a question. I think perfectly reasonable ask and request, and certainly perfectly reasonable justification in that there's an articulated promise to not slow down an already dragged out, elongated process. I think it would be more than justifiable for the Ward and Underwood communities to feel a certain sense of whiplash at just the cadence of the working groups, the meetings, the et cetera, that have progressed over the past, since I've been a member of this committee and certainly before. And so all of that being said, I'm confident that with Josh Morse leading the work, that there will be this objective, very rigorous analysis. And with the commitment that you've articulated of June as when you'd be able to make a decision vis-a-vis what is the path, what is the next step for one, if not both of these schools, that's great. I don't think there's any one way to hit this nail on this particular head, so long as it does in fact get struck well, struck good, and that this commitment that we've been dangling out to these communities is realized. So I'm comfortable in that. I have great confidence in you and your team being able to, hit that nail on the head, to beat the dead analogy. But I do think it's important that, again, for the communities that are feeling this whiplash, it was an important discussion for us to have. It was a discussion that we're going to need our collective community-wide muscle memory around to say, hey, what is right for our kids? What is right for our staff? What is right for our community? And if consolidation is appropriate to consider, we ought to consider it. And this committee has to have the chutzpah, the whatever you want to call it, the nerve to be able to face that discussion without reservation and to handle it in a way that invites the community in. And I think we've done that. I think this process is holding true to that. And for that reason, I have no reservations as to this slight change in direction.
May I just add one thing? I appreciate that, really helpful. I want to be clear with the committee and the community, however, that we are, at least in my administration, not going to be able to fund any significant capital outlay such as a school or a police station without a debt exclusion override. So let's be really clear about that. The funds are simply not there otherwise. I personally am confident that if we put this out to the voters will support that. I think the voters have consistently understood the need for capital projects, whether it's schools or fire stations. I think likewise with additional schools and a police station, the voters would approve as well. But again, whatever course we chart, we're going to have to then get voter approval for the funding to make it reality.
Victor?
So just, I guess, I was going to say 3 points, but you articulated so well that I appreciate that that's the reality that we're facing is if we're going to do this through a different path, the override at some point is, or debt exclusion, I should say, to be more precise, will be required. So I appreciate your clarity and transparency on that, Mayor. I also think unless, I think I want to make sure I heard it correctly, that as of now, war remains the priority. There is no, I mean, again, and things could theoretically change, but to my knowledge, there's no intent to move Ward from that most urgent position.
You want me to? So the long range plan, which was approved on December 15th, indicates Ward as number 1 and Underwood as number 2. That is the current status.
Okay. And then, yeah. And so that I think is another point to just put out there. And yeah, thank you. And then the last one for me is just more of a information understanding. Again, we may not have the answer today. That is, I'm understanding this to mean that if we do not submit a statement of interest to the MSBA, we're not losing a place in line, so to speak, or anything of that nature, right? Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. There's no place in line. We are getting MSBA funding currently for Countryside. That is an ongoing project. They typically do not fund more than one school building in a district at one time, especially a district like Newton. And there's no guarantee for any school building that we are going to get MSBA funding. I want to be also really clear about that. In my mind, while I'd love to get the MSBA funding for as many school buildings as possible, that should not change our determination as to whether or not we do school buildings. I think these are a necessity, and we'll have to grapple with that.
Thank you, Mayor.
To address your inline question, I think it is important to kind of ask ourselves, what's different today than was on the table December 15th? And one of the things was an understanding that Newton would get in line by putting these SOIs forward. And that even if we made the choice, which we thought, well, it could really definitely happen in 1 to 2 years, 1 to 2 cycles, that we would switch them out for Brown, but we'd be in line. You know, a bigger project, a Brown or a Newton South giant repair is a bigger project. MSBA likes big projects. We have been told, and the mysteries of the MSBA process continue to confound us all, I will say. But in recent discussions with some of the folks who have a lot of experience with it at the city level and others say, no, the project is in line. It's not that the city is in line. And so the idea that we would benefit from putting these forward if we weren't going to do them, and I feel like now we're really not sure how we would do it, that benefit is not what we thought it was at December 15th. Yep, Ben and then Ari.
I'd like to defer to let Ari go first.
Okay, all right.
I just want to highlight that thank you, Mayor Laredo, for putting this forward. I know from my experience when attending these community forums in the fall, I think a lot of fear from the community was we were going to submit these SOIs with this box checked, and it was going to devolve into we were consolidating schools and we were cutting the community out of the process. And I think this memo right here kind of retracts that in a sense, in that we are fully committing to have the community involved in the process, and that I think we can put faith in the administration to do a thoughtful analysis, and that we can then come to the community, say, this is what we found. Here are the 2 paths forward. This one seems more feasible compared to the other, and really go from there. Because I think I'm not to speak out of turn, but I do think that when we got to those meetings, well, whether it was intentional or not, it did feel like it became neighbor first neighbor. And I think that became a really unhealthy community space for us. And I think as a committee, we need to really work hard to avoid that.
Okay, Ben, thank you.
Well said. I agree with that. The one piece of information from the past conversation that hasn't been addressed, I think, is the notion that we would learn a lot by going through the process. I think everybody understood we would not win it. We would not get the grant the first time around, but we would learn by going through that. Do we no longer believe that's true, or do we think that the juice isn't worth the squeeze of having everybody here running around putting it together? How do we think about that idea of learning?
Yeah, I can answer and then you can jump in. So
please.
The process is underway. So the district is well along the path of preparing the SOIs. So this would stop them, and that would save some work, which is a smart thing to do if we don't really think we're going to submit them. And then Mr. Morse is pulling forward a lot of that work that the MSBA would do. As Tamika has pointed out a million times during this process, what we do on the city side, even if we're not using MSBA funding, is still the MSBA process. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I have tremendous confidence in Chief Operating Officer Morse. He's done this. He's done it successfully. I don't know how he does it, but he brings in our buildings on time. He doesn't sleep, number one, but he brings in our projects on time and under budget. You can't ask for more than that. And anyone who's been to any of our new schools, and we now have a bunch of them, just has to look around and see how great they are. I have every bit of confidence that the next round is going to be equally as good.
You have something, Tyler? Go ahead.
I just wanted to reiterate and support what Tamika, you were saying, because as I've noticed conversations around Warden Underwood circulating among schools and my peers, and the more I think about it, I think it is very important that we are willing to have difficult conversations as a committee and as a community, and continue trying to create spaces like you're saying. And I just want to make sure that as a committee, we are still willing to do the critical thinking, do the community outreach, do the reflection, even if it can be uncomfortable or less convenient for the plans that we have.
Tyler, that's a superb observation. And I'll say this, if the decision is to go for two separate schools, Ward being the first one in the process, the first question the voters are going to ask us is, why didn't you look to consolidate? So we need to be prepared to answer that question. But I'm comfortable that Chief Operating Officer Morse, with the information that's been gathered already, and there's a lot of information that's been put together over the past several years, is able to look at this at least at a very high level and say consolidation is feasible or it's not feasible. And if it's not feasible, let's not waste any more time on it. If it is feasible, then we have to have the very serious discussion about whether to consolidate or not. And I think the point is, if you don't even have the discussion at all, then you lose all credibility with the voters.
Jonathan, did you have something?
A comment and a question. The first is, I agree with everything, Mr. Mayor, that you were saying around the importance of the narrative and the understanding and the depth of thought that we need to communicate to the community if we're going to go back and say that we're going to spend money on building new schools. I'm completely aligned there. I think it's hugely important. I think it's also hugely important that we as a school committee and the city as a city and the ultimate arbiter of the dollars approach this together, and that we've got, not the same thing, but an aligned way of understanding each other, so that as we go to make a recommendation to the city and to the voters on what we want to do, that we've vetted something that's possible. So that I'm super supportive and I think is really critical. My question is, how do I think about the work that that Chief Operating Officer Morse is doing? Is that work that's always done by the city in these processes? Is that something that he is doing at the behest of the school committee? And so he comes back to this body and says, here's what we think, here's the analysis that's been done and what the right answer likely is. And then we can have I'm not going to call it arm's length, but distinct conversation about what the city can realistically pay for versus what is right for the school system. How do I understand
I think the starting point is consolidation a feasible alternative or not? Okay. By feasible, you're looking at the data that's been put together over a bunch of years, location, busing costs, school populations, all the factors that go into that, whether you would consolidate two schools, so you might have a school of 600 students. Okay. That's what you'd be looking at. You look at that at a very high level analysis, and Chief Operating Officer Morse comes in here, gives his presentation to this body, and this body will listen to that and say, yes, it is feasible, and now we need to go continue to explore it, or no, it's not feasible. We're not going to explore it anymore. And whatever that decision is, we'll abide by that, and we'll follow the directive of the school committee. Obviously, from there's a whole lot of other things that still need to be done. If it is two schools, then you got to start thinking about what would a new school at Ward look like, at least at a very high level, so you have enough information to be able to go out to the voters and say, this is what we're going to do. If it's consolidation, you would undergo a more detailed analysis of whether the committee wants to go that route or not. That's a policy decision. If it says it does, assuming it does, then you go through the same process of where would we locate that school and what would building it look like, so you could go out to the voters. If the committee says, no, we do not want to go that route, then we go back to looking at Ward first and then Underwood. But again, my sense is we don't want to spin our wheels in this multi-year analysis of something that at a very high level, when you've looked at the data, is not feasible. And that's the
And-
whole purpose of this
I
analysis.
I am super supportive of that. Getting to clarity both for the planning, both for expectations for families in the districts, for this governing body so that we can move forward, for the city so that we can have a plan, and for voters so that we can figure out what needs to happen with tax base. The faster we can ground that out and have an aligned plan, the happier the entire city is going to be. I'm fully aligned there.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Just to answer your question, it's a joint effort between, so we can't do
Yeah.
it without the mayor in a city,
Yeah.
right? But you control, legal control over the educational program and the design and the specifications. But it's a hand in glove process. We happen to have Josh Morse, who used to be the building commissioner, who is now the operations person. He has deep expertise in this area. When I do these projects in a town, it's the school committee starts it with the DPW, and then we get a project override or debt exclusion, whether it's MSBA or not, and then you appoint an OPM who does the Josh Morse type
Yeah.
scenario. Although I understand the city also hires an OPM for their project management, but we're a big city, so. But you would be in charge of what the parameters are, but the mayor, we can't do it without the
But
mayor.
it's a, if I may, it's a completely iterative process. I mean, we've
Yeah.
done this, as you know, with multiple buildings. The school system is intimately involved in what the programmatic needs are of each school, and they do vary. Although we try to be consistent across the board, there's always some individual variances based on the size of the school and other factors. And again, I have that part is easy. I think I have no doubt that we'll work closely and collaboratively with the school department to get the best possible project that we can.
But it almost seems as if all the discussions we had about checking the box and not checking the box, and kind of the feelings that Ari talked about were not needed.
No, you know what? I wouldn't say they weren't needed. I think it was an appropriate thinking of the school committee in the past to look at this very carefully. They exercised judgment at the time based on the information they had. There's nothing wrong with that. We've come in and looked at this and said, wait a minute, before we spend any more time, let's at least make sure we understand the high level feasibility of it. And that's why we're deferring the application, because we may have submitted for another building, not necessarily Ward or Underwood. And if we are going to go forward, this committee will have that opportunity to decide if it's feasible, whether they're going to check the box or not. But we're not there yet.
So I love our little music symphony. So I think, Linda, the way that I think about it, and I've thought about this a great deal since I read the memo, is it essentially it's ending up potentially in a very similar place. Whether we, as the prior school committee authorized, check the box and do the analysis and get to the blah, blah, blah. What the mayor is proposing is, instead of doing that, we do the analysis and get to the blah, blah, blah. So it's just a different path. And for me, the operative part was June. We'll know by June. We will work like grease lightning to get real good grasp as to where we need to be to make a decision and make that call. But to the other process, I think we would have gotten to that feasibility call very quickly. That was essentially what was going on. Not as quickly as this, thank you very much, but same narrative.
All right. Okay, so I think we need to give the public time to talk to us about this. This is, again, might feel like a bit of a whiplash moment for some. So I am going to suggest that we take it to a vote on March 9th, which is our next meeting. And there could be a couple different Robert's Rules gymnastics in terms of how we vote it. But one of the ways, which is probably the more likely way, will be a motion to amend the vote of December 15th. And so I would like to give you notice now, because that is part of the rules, that I might be putting forward that motion on March 9th to amend the vote of December 15th, which did two things. It approved the long-range plan, and it directed the district to submit the SOIs, to work on the SOIs with the consider consolidation box checked. The amendment that I would move is that we remove the language, just the language that directs the district to prepare the SOIs and with the boxes checked. So it would preserve the approval of the long-range plan. So mull that over. We can consider like a brand new motion, and that could happen too. That would be a little bit cleaner, but I don't know that it actually has the effect we want. So questions on that? Nope. All right. We're adjourned, folks.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Feels like a big show.
Very similar. So if
But
you
yes.
can come with minutes, I agree. You know, the issues vary a little bit.
Yeah.
Recording stopped.